Good morning, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the first edition of the North America Blockchain Conference. Today, we have a very special guest from the SFU Technology Management Club, their Vice President, Dylan Marston, who will be giving all of us the official welcome message. Soon thereafter, we will start with our first talk on the Bitcoin standard, all right? So I'm passing it over to you, Dylan.
Hi, and welcome. Good afternoon, everybody. If you're on Eastern time with me, or good morning if you're on Pacific time, I'm on the Pacific time. Thank you for joining us today online as we welcome you to the North America Blockchain Conference. Like Jose said, my name is Dylan. I am the Vice President of SFU Technology Management Club here in Vancouver, Canada. We got some exciting discussions and events for you all today, so I hope you're ready. We're going to be starting at 1:15 Eastern Time with the Bitcoin Standard interview, 2 p.m. introduction to crypto zombies or coding on the Ethereum blockchain, 2:45 a fireside chat with friends of Puerto Rico, 3 p.m. getting started with DeFi, 3:45 a discussion about social tokens, and lastly the value behind non-fungible tokens at 4:05. The closing statement will be held at 4:50. I hope you'll enjoy the conference and gain some valuable information. A special thank you to the contributing speakers and organizers at Blockchain Puerto Rico and the sponsors to help make this event possible. I'll be handing it back over to Jose and then over to Riley.
Thank you for that warm introduction, Dylan. Um, our first panel is actually scheduled for 1:15, so we may start a little earlier. I am going to consult our panelists. If not, then don't worry, we'll start promptly after 1:15. Now that we are only a few minutes away from our first discussion on the Bitcoin standard, I'd like to take a moment to present to you guys both the moderator and our special guest. Our moderator being Riley Baton, co-president of the SFU Technology Management Club, and also a very appreciated helper of Blockchain Puerto Rico and member of our team, as well as our special guest, Mr. Paul Wayland, who is a professor at the Inter-American University of Puerto Rico. He is a distinguished student of economics, mathematics, and statistics. You know, that fits into mathematics, but we'll leave it at that. And I welcome you guys to enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Jose, for the nice introduction. Nice to meet you, Paul. How are you doing today? Oh, I don't know if I can hear you. I think you're maybe muted. Oh, you're muted right now.
Yes, I am. Sorry about that. Thank you for having me. I'm very happy to have been invited.
Oh, awesome. All right. So we're going to be here. This is a Bitcoin standard talk. So we're going to talk about past monetary policies, such as the gold standard, talk about Bitcoin, some recent news, and how this all can tie together.
Okay, great.
All right, so let's first kick it off here. So as you may recall, in 1971, the United States was taken off the gold standard. Why do you think this happened?
Yeah, fortunately for us, we don't exactly recall, right? We're a little younger than that. I'm a little closer to that date, I'm sure, than you are. The gist of it is it was difficult to maintain. I mean, globalization made it very difficult to maintain the gold reserves necessary for this, and it was a very slow move from pure gold standard, actually from gold as money, right? It was originally commodity money and then representative money and then different levels of gold standards all the way to the gold exchange standard, which is the main countries participating in global trade were using dollar standard, and then the dollar was on the gold standard. That was at the same time very convenient for U.S. monetary policy because of the power they held on global monetary policy. But then it it required a lot of responsibility and work on the U.S. government. It was very, very difficult to do. And then the Vietnam War created incredible deficits. To be fair, when Nixon eliminated the gold exchange standard, it was a pause, right? It was meant as a pause, and then they intended to go back, and they tried twice, 73 and 76. You're welcome to check me on that. I'm going off memory on those dates, but the pause showed something important too. It was really hard to get back, and evidencing that difficulty made very many people comfortable with leaving the gold standard, and it worked. I mean, the economy survived, global trade continued, the buildings didn't burn, so it was possible to survive without it, and that was the reason.
Right. So I think one of the drawbacks that you're just mentioning, I guess it's really hard for the governments to manage it, right? And that's why it was difficult for them to get back to it.
Right, exactly. It's very, very hard. I mean, most countries were comfortable at the time with the U.S. being the one gold standard and everybody tying to the dollar. I'm not sure that could happen today. I don't believe China or the European Union would be comfortable with that arrangement. Maybe the UK, and then certainly not Russia. So you're eliminating almost every first world power, going back to the last gold exchange standard. Now we could talk about previous gold standards, but then the U.S., which I do believe has an incentive, right, because of the power it holds. It wouldn't get the power. It would just have the work of having to manage a gold standard. But no one's going to go back to the gold exchange standard, even though the dollar is very much a standard coin today. It wouldn't work the same as it did in the 70s.
Right. You make a really good point on all that, and I want to go and lead into the Bitcoin now. It's a very exciting topic nowadays, and people see it as as something similar to gold, as like a way of scarcity, good store of value. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so I'm fascinated by the comparison, and I can see where it comes from. And so why is gold valued, or why was gold valued as money at one point? And some of it is what makes it attractive as a stable investment, right? It's rare. It does continue to be found and be mined, but it is rare enough and difficult enough that there's a control on supply. It's durable, right? It's not going to go away. I mean, food is incredibly has intrinsic value, but most of it is very perishable. It's divisible, right? So we can split gold into small pieces, and it's still gold. I mean, an atom of gold, even though we don't trade at that level, is still gold. And an ounce and whatever you can think of going up from an atom is still gold. It's fungible. It's easy to change shape, to move. It has a high value relative to weight, and it's easy to identify, right? Those are 5 things that gold has that make it really good for that. And then when you look at Bitcoin, it really matches all 5 of those either well or better than gold. I mean, it is rare by definition. It is, and we know the supply. It is absolutely limited. I mean, in a sense, gold is limited, right? Whatever gold is on this planet, we're not going to get more of it, right? It came from stardust, but we don't even know how much that is. With Bitcoin, we know an exact amount, and we know what the finality of that is. It is incredibly durable, right? It would require erasing a ridiculous amount of data on hard drives to eliminate it completely. That might even make it more durable than gold. That's a tough argument. It's incredibly divisible. I mean, again, there are limits, but it is incredibly divisible. Its fungibility is as far as infinite as you could go, right? It only exists in zeros and ones in memory. So, and then it's 100% identifiable. In those criteria, it just really matches really, really well with gold. But then there's the idea of store of value. So let's look at gold. Gold is not as stable as people claim. I mean, it soars higher and crashes harder than the average market. So the store of value is a long-term concept and not a bad one, but the idea of this protection from short-term inflation is misleading. For long-term inflation, it has worked incredibly well for as long as it's existed as an investment, which is I'm going to say 100 plus years, and then even more if you count non-formal investment, countries hoarding it, or people. And then Bitcoin is its long-term is very hard to evaluate. I mean, we don't have enough time. We've got 10 years in the kindest estimate. We do know that it's in the short term, it soars much higher and it crashes much harder. I mean, in the short term, it's even worse than gold. Then we can look at why gold was good as money. I think that's an interesting comparison because Bitcoin, again, matches so well and in many cases better, right? So the attributes, some of them are the same: scarcity, durability, divisibility, those are the same. But then there's transportability and its lack of counterfeitability. Certainly, Bitcoin surpasses gold with flying colors. So then, even though I'm comfortable with the argument as Bitcoin being a like gold store of value, it's much better as an argument for money in the sense that gold was money. So, and if Bitcoin is money, then you'd need a different store of value, right? Because the idea of gold as a store of value is protection from market behaviors of money. And then we have to get into monetary policy. I don't know if you want to get into that, but that's
No, you make a good point, like how Bitcoin, like it's super volatile, and if you want something that's a good store of value, you can't have it. Like the last month, it probably crashed like 50%.
Right. And in the long term, though, that may not matter, right? So the truth is, if we look at the period we have, which is relatively short, it's not even a good store of value. It's a ridiculously, extraordinarily good investment. I mean, the increase in value is unprecedented. It makes many traditional investors uncomfortable because of how the medium term, let's say, how much has it gone up. But then the whole idea of store of value is the opposite. It's so I'm going to put it there and I can survive the market swings. Well, it doesn't do that well, at least not today.
Right. Maybe as time goes on, because I think the moment it came out maybe 10 years ago, like it's still volatile, but not as volatile as it was maybe 10 years ago when it first was introduced.
Yeah, well, and that has to do with the incredible, with how large the value of a single Bitcoin is, right? So the swing from a penny to 2 pennies is very different from 60,000 to 30,000. And you can see just what happened with Dogecoin, right? So the volatility of Dogecoin is so much higher because of the tiny value, and single market players have incredible impact on Dogecoin, and that really doesn't happen with Bitcoin today.
Right. Do you see it maybe as a possibility as time goes on? I guess if there's more liquidity,
I absolutely believe that it will become more stable. Will it have the stability of traditional money? I don't think so, because of lack of monetary policy. So the dollar is not naturally stable. It is artificially stable. It is done so by intervention. And then cryptocurrencies don't have inherent monetary policy, right? It's just static or predictably mined, let's say.
Right. And I think for Bitcoin, the mining ends, I think, in the year 2140, like another 100 some odd years.
I believe you. It is something like that, but I don't remember the exact date. Right. And the important part is not exactly the end date, but the exact predictability, or the very accurate. I mean, it's not exact. There's some seconds and minutes difference on when coin gets mined, but we know the amount, and we can know at this point within a margin of 5 minutes what the total mined cryptocurrency of Bitcoin and like cryptocurrencies. So
Yeah.
go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead. Sorry.
So that is an interesting prospect for money, but it has the opposite effect in stability, right? Even though that knowledge is useful, it's 100% subject to market versus policy.
Right. I think another thing too, with Bitcoin being money, like the transactions aren't fast enough too. It's only processing maybe 10 to 12 per minute, I think, or something. So the speeds would really have to go up if it is acting like money then, right, too?
Right. For a global money system, it absolutely would. But there's many innovations addressing that, and we'll see what sticks. Currently, it is functioning as money for very, very few transactions. The large percentage of transactions in Bitcoin are investment, right? People are putting money there because they believe it's going to go up, and they're selling because they believe it's going to go down. It's for trading. And the percentage used for money is relatively tiny. And at the highest estimate I've seen is 15%, which I think is very inaccurate. The lower ends are in the 1% and 2%. And I believe that's more precise. And in that case, it doesn't really matter. But as money, you're absolutely right. It would need to handle volumes on the order of 7,000 transactions per second versus maybe about 10,000 every 10 minutes is really what it is. It's every block is about 10 minutes, and then all the transactions we can fit in a block is really the limitation.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Oh, just to correct myself too, is it's like roughly 6 per second. I said 10 per minute. That was
right.
That was awesome.
No, that's fine. That's fine. I appreciate it. Right. So, but it is the 10 minutes is the block, right? So even though you split the transactions, even that each transaction takes about 10 minutes, and that's another limitation, right? There's certain types of transactions where this is not comfortable, right? So a fast food restaurant, for example, there are workarounds, but it's not the traditional way of managing it.
Right. But what are your thoughts on the Lightning Network? I know the CEO of Twitter, Jack, was mentioning like it's possible you can build that on Twitter, and it's like a layer 2 for Bitcoin.
I'm fascinated by it. So I'm a doctoral student. I'm a professor, but I'm also a doctoral student. I'm doing a doctorate in data analysis, data analytics. And my thesis, my dissertation, is on technology that makes cryptocurrency viable, right? It makes it scalable is really the word for anything, not just for commodity as a commodity or in cryptocurrencies, right? Blockchain applied to anything, because currently that speed limitation is limiting, excuse the redundancy, for certain scales. So Lightning Network and things like that are fascinating to me. Anything that is sidechain or off-chain, I think addresses many of these issues. And it really compares well to the way a lot of our transactions currently work. I mean, the whole trustless environment for Bitcoin and cryptocurrency is fascinating, innovative, brilliant. It's genius. But if you add trust on at a smaller scale, which is really the way a lot of this works, you can overcome the scalable issues while having the whole the entire back end working in a trustless peer-to-peer network.
Oh, that's very interesting. So so you're mentioning how there has to be a little bit of trust added if there is something like a Lightning Network introduced.
Right. Lightning Network works on trust, right? So you're managing the quick transactions on a smaller scale, and you could either have a third party manage trust, like a bank or a Visa or etc., or the the two-party system, right? So if you know me, then I can get my transaction done in 10 seconds. And if you don't, well, you're going to have to wait 10 minutes, right? So, but that really, that even though we don't see it, that really is the way a lot of this works, right? So you have many of us have credit cards. This third party trusts the payee to eventually settle that transaction, either within 30 days or longer with interest. That third party is trusting us, and then the vendor, in a sense, is trusting the buyer too. If the buyer challenges the transaction, the credit card will automatically assume that the buyer is right. So the vendor is taking a risk whenever he accepts a credit card transaction. There's a lot of trust there, even though we don't see it, right? We do this every day, and we think it's very normal. And the trust at that tiny level makes the entire system function much, much better, even though these transactions are settled not 10 minutes later, 30 days, and in some cases longer, right? You pay your credit card bill monthly, and in some cases you don't even settle it within a month. There's a lot of trust, has nothing to do with the vendor in on that end, right? The third party is trusting the buyer to settle that transaction. If you add a third party, which I know adds transaction costs, and people are very wary of that with these things, but I think there is space for a marriage between a trust built system and a trustless system that attends two different parts of the same money network.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that could bring value, right, and like help improve things. And so I would like to swing over to, like, in the most recent news. I think this is one of the biggest things that happened in Bitcoin recently. Is El Salvador made Bitcoin legal tender. It's the first country in the world to make this decision, and there's talk now that other countries are maybe following suit. I think we just want to touch in, like, why did they make this decision?
Oh, so many reasons. Okay, I think this is fascinating news, surprising on my end, right? I was aware of it when they were introducing the bill before it was signed, but I didn't even know it was a consideration before then. I know that Bukele and the El Salvador government were trying to make a Bitcoin friendly or a cryptocurrency friendly environment. So why do this? First, the volume of money. So El Salvador has, I think, 25% of their transactions are remittances, right? It's money coming in from expatriates, diaspora, sending on the order of $6 billion a year, which is 25% of their GDP. So this is unique to a handful of Latin American countries, African countries, and Asian countries. No first world country can even remotely relate to this, right? No European country, none. Certainly not the US, not China, not Russia, not Japan, not any of these countries you can think of. So these remittances, there's a transaction cost to every time someone sends money, right? Western Union being the preferred method, a significant transaction cost. And the argument on Bukele's end is to save that money, right? To save his citizens, or the citizens of El Salvador, to save them money. And that's not false, but then on his end, that stimulates an increase in remittances, right? So the idea is, they save this transaction fee, and at least part of that savings ends up in the pockets of San Salvador economy, right? And then he was already seeing, right? So there was already an increase in remittances in Bitcoin. Before even this law, they saw the trend. They were aware people are doing this, and I imagine that leads them to the question, why are they doing this? And then the savings in remittances. Then there's self-promotion, right? So, I mean, what are the what are the odds if this doesn't happen that Bukele is part of a conversation among, I'm going to say, probably mostly North Americans relating to cryptocurrency, right? Bukele is a big name now in social media, and even though we're not going to vote in El Salvador, at some point that feeds back into whatever social media use there is in El Salvador. It's a big name. I can only imagine. I have no contact with social media accounts in El Salvador. I mean, it's not known as a country that tries to close off their social media. So I'm sure it's readily accessible. I just don't happen to know anybody.
Right.
Then there's the risk. It's a risk-free proposition, or at the very least, it's incredibly low risk. I mean, what are the consequences of this? The recent poll had 95% of businesses are comfortable with the Bitcoin option, but they want it to be optional. So it's not like business they're going to all of a sudden say, "Oh, it's only Bitcoin in this business," and that may happen, but it'll be the exception. So there's not a big risk. Then there's power. So I'm not going to try on and tie how Bukele gets power from this, even though I can speculate. But I will say that his previous moves show that he's mainly motivated by increasing political power. I mean, he sent soldiers to Congress to I'm going to say intimidate. His argument will be different. In his words, he didn't do a military takeover because God told him not to, and he took control of the Supreme Court. I mean, he's very much his political moves are motivated by power. Tied into this law is not just Bitcoin as legal tender, but there's a tax incentive, so that attracts investment. It's similar to what we have in Puerto Rico, Law Act 2022, but this is strictly Bitcoin. So I believe he's attempting, and I believe he will succeed in at least getting some investors or people with a lot of wealth moving there and spending money. It has worked in Puerto Rico. There's a big move of there's a palpable presence of almost exclusively American investors coming in to take advantage of the tax incentive. And then the last reason I want to say is his policies are nationalistic, anti-U.S. Their main currency is the dollar, and this is an affront to the U.S. So this bolsters his political position in moving away, or at least giving an alternative to a legal tender that is of a country that he accuses of imperialistic power.
Right. No, that's some really good points, and especially I was kind of reading this the other day. Like, real estate prices have really gone up in El Salvador. That could be from
I think it's mostly speculation, but I believe at least some of that speculation will end up being true. I do believe that it will happen. I'm seeing it in real time in Puerto Rico.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think so the big benefits that El Salvador gets is saving on remittances that you're mentioning. It's also on like investors coming in, and then you're also saying, like, I guess going away from the dollar, right? So basing on something else.
Right, but going away from the dollar is benefit for Bukele. Like it bolsters his political position. But then the country can benefit. I mean, the inherent benefits of cryptocurrency, right? Speed of transaction. So we were talking about speed of transaction on a day-to-day, face-to-face basis. But when you're sending money overseas, 10 minutes is nothing. These transactions take days. There's the cost of transaction. So I don't want to get into the weeds on this. That cryptocurrency is treated as a no transaction cost process, and there is a transaction cost. It's inflation related, and so. But there's no transaction cost to the individual, right? It is either non-existent, transparent, or a drop in the bucket compared to volatility of the value. So it becomes insignificant. Then there's no spending limits. So there's limits to how much you can spend through you can send via almost any dollar remittance system. And then there's anonymity, which is double-edged. For the individual, it's certainly an advantage. For the country, well, there's the disadvantage. It promotes certain black market and illegal transactions. Then there's the monetary policy benefits that countries that manage their currency have, right? El Salvador doesn't get any of those benefits. The U.S. dollar is not. They have absolutely no say on the monetary policy. So they don't lose the monetary policy benefits because they don't have them. And though they can benefit from the U.S.'s monetary policy interventions, if and when their economy is in the same position, for example, if they need the dollar to devalue, if they need inflation, which is not a rare thing, but it only will happen when that's tied together, and that doesn't happen coincidentally. I mean, their economies are tied together, but they're not married. And then there's a lot of other benefits that they don't see any of, or very indirectly. The increase from spending, right? So the U.S. government is increasing spending, and that will stimulate the U.S. economy. That will have a trickle effect on El Salvador, but certainly not the same, while they suffer the same inflation effects. And then open market operations, right? The bond trading that the Fed is going to engage in right now and is engaging in, it doesn't really, I mean, it does, but it only benefits El Salvador indirectly. So the benefits of Bitcoin, which we just talked about, exist, but the loss of monetary policy is insignificant or a lot less. So even if they were to move away completely from the dollar and go completely cryptocurrency, the loss to them is not significant.
Right. I guess, yeah, looking at the pros and cons for them, right? Like,
right.
If they go fully Bitcoin, and they're not losing as much if they're going away from the US dollar.
Exactly. It's not their coin. They don't have the monetary policy benefits. Right.
Do you see any other countries like following the same suit as Salvador?
I do. I mean, this is an experiment, and we have to see how it goes. I think that any government interest is going to wait. Now that El Salvador has done it, it gives them the opportunity to see. Well, let's see what happens there. But I think there's a big incentive for any country that does not have monetary policy, that does not have their own coin, and is interested in participating. I mean, I've considered the possibility of government-sponsored cryptocurrencies, right? That's different from central bank digital currencies, which is what China is doing with the yuan, and the U.S. is talking about. But a consortium of countries that are U.S. dollar dependent could move to a single cryptocurrency, or could generate their own cryptocurrency. See, that the problem with an agreed upon coin that more than one country manages is, where does the monetary policy lie? The European Union has successfully done that, but it's not without its problems. And they already have this complex organization that has existed for all these years, a shared government, etc. But let's say Central American countries want to do the same. They don't have the structure. An alternative is to remove monetary policy. Nobody controls it, or it is exactly predictable, right? So the supply of money will be limited in this manner. I think there's incentive for countries to do that. Alternatively, once El Salvador is doing Bitcoin, if and when that's a common transaction, there's a trickle effect, right? They trade with their neighbors, and there's an incentive to trade in that coin. The way currency ends up being currencies is fascinating. When the U.S. becomes a country, or shortly after, when the U.S. dollar is minted, right? There is a U.S. coin. It wasn't accepted in almost any place in the Union. The most commonly accepted coin was the Spanish peso, and it was because local traders in the U.S. were confident that they could buy Spanish goods with it, and if the U.S. government collapsed, they wouldn't have been able to buy anything with the dollar, right? So obviously, the further away they were from Washington, D.C., or no, I'm sorry, not from Washington, D.C., from Philadelphia, the farther away from Philadelphia, the less likely they were to be trading in U.S. dollars. The same thing happens with any possible trading medium. So the closer you are to El Salvador, the more incentive there is to do something like El Salvador.
Right, that's a very good point. Like, I guess depending where you are, and if you're really close to El Salvador, yeah, then there's more incentive since they're doing it. Then it can benefit you and everyone, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. So I guess speaking of like what we were talking about, like as monetary policy, like I guess the gold standard, like thinking outside the box, is a Bitcoin standard possible? Like something maybe not, like obviously not now, but in the future.
Is it possible? Yes, absolutely, it's possible. The question is why. I mean, what are the benefits? We already saw. I might have mentioned some of the benefits, disadvantages of the gold standard, and we can get into them. But so Bitcoin matches well with gold. It's rare, durable, divisible, fungible. It's easy to identify. It does match well. But then in that sense, it has a lot of the problems of gold, other than transferability, right? So they don't have to physically move it. It would all happen digitally. But there's no big advantage to tying fiat money to anything these days, much less to something that's more volatile than money. The U.S. or anybody considering doing something like this would lose the monetary policy power to gain. I mean, it's less stable. There's not a lot of incentive. Could it be done? Absolutely. Before anyone is considering it, it would have to gain a lot of market stability. I mean, it would have to be very market stable, which it certainly is not. I have trouble seeing how someone would be motivated to it. I think it's more likely to use it as money directly. I mean, if you tie it to Bitcoin, then there's really not that much incentive to even use the dollar. I mean, assuming scalability is solved, assuming you can do transactions quickly, then there's no big advantage. It compares incredibly well to gold as money, and then it doesn't have any of the disadvantages of the physical properties of gold. It does have the lack of monetary policy, which is a double-edged sword. Many crypto enthusiasts are very critical of monetary policy, but there are incredible benefits to it. It's an entirely different discussion. But I see it much more likely as money, as legal tender, which they did in El Salvador, as opposed to something to tie money to.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's very good points in how it's more of like a legal tender than a monetary policy. Is a bit more. There's benefits to it, but there's drawdowns too, right? So
right. Significant ones from my view.
Right. Before we end the discussion, would you like any pieces of advice you'd like to share with the audience?
Right. So I'm assuming a lot of our audience is enthusiastic about cryptocurrency, which is wonderful. I would say consider the source. Whenever you're reading anything, consider the source. There's motivation behind everybody saying something, right? So when the Federal Reserve is critical of cryptocurrency, right? So they manage monetary policy. They have a built-in incentive to protect the US dollar. So they're critical. You have to consider that the source, but you also have to consider the source when Coinbase it publishes an article on Bitcoin, right? They manage a whole bunch of transactions in cryptocurrency. You have to weigh those sources. I mean, when you hear Elon Musk or you read a tweet about on Elon Musk, you got to consider his motivation. When Bukele makes anything, you have to consider his motivations. Which even if you're not critical of Bukele like me, you have to assume that they are political. And then be wary of any extreme, right? Assuming that Bitcoin is this panacea that can solve everything is probably a mistake. Assuming that it is from the devil and it will burn down houses is ridiculous, right? So all the extremes are likely bad. I mean, don't assume that any of these innovations are snake oil, right? But they're not necessarily going to cure cancer either, right? You gotta look at it for what it is. I mean, I compare the view on marijuana from the 80s war on drugs and then the alternative that I hear that marijuana cures everything, right? So the truth is somewhere in between. I'm very much for legalization. I know that this isn't a political discussion, but that does, just because I'm for legalization doesn't mean that I believe it's the ideal treatment for brain tumor, right? There is an in between. So one of the problems with any new technology, particularly one with a lot of money tied to it, is that money motivates a lot of the narrative, both for and against. So whenever you're reading anything, consider the source.
I think that's really good advice. I know one of my mentors, he keeps drilling me saying, "Oh, critical thinking, make sure you look at it from both angles," right? So I think that's excellent advice. Before we go, we have one question from the audience. So it's something regarding Cardano compared to Bitcoin. Is it something that we should take? They believe it's a too low a value, or
I don't know Cardano. I'll gladly look it up, read, and offer my opinion. I don't know it. I am a don't discard anything. So if is it not worth looking into, that's never my position. But some things are just hype, right? That certainly does happen. But don't discard anything.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think we're almost out of time here, but I thank you so much, Paul, this was a great talk that we had. And
thank you. I'm very, very happy to be invited. I'm looking forward to the remaining talks.
Yeah, I am too. I'm pretty excited about it all too. So, but thank you so much. This was a great talk, and I hope that everyone in the audience, they all learned a lot about the Bitcoin and different monetary policies in El Salvador, what they're doing there. And
yeah, I'll be around if you want to write anything in the chat. I'll take 5 minutes to see what I can quickly learn on Cardano. I don't know that I can give a very informed answer, but I can talk to Jose about establishing communication with the person interested.
All right, awesome. That sounds good. I'll pass it on to Jose now. But you have yourself a good day, though, Paul.
You too. Thank you, Ryan. See you soon.
Thank you guys for that enriching discussion. We definitely did have questions from the audience regarding Cardano and our discussion on monetary policy. But, we had to limit it because we are short on time. However, we are about to receive in about 5 minutes our next speaker, who will be giving a small workshop on crypto zombies, which is a platform where you can learn to code Solidity. So I think it will be a valuable workshop, and I invite you guys to stay tuned in so that you can take advantage of that workshop to the fullest. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in once more. And now I would like to present to you our next speaker. His name is Carlos Carle. He is an industrial engineer by trade and also a smart contract developer. He will be receiving questions in the comment section below. Remember, you can only ask questions if you're on the YouTube or Facebook live stream, okay? And you do that by commenting on the screen, all right? I mean, on the live stream video. So please keep that in mind. Submit your questions, and I hope you enjoy the next panel. Carlos, you're up. Thank you for joining us.
All right. I think we're live. Let me know if there's any issues. But hey, everyone. My name's Carlos. Thanks to Jose for giving that nice introduction. Like you mentioned, I'm an engineer and developer. I'm currently the operations manager at Blockchain Puerto Rico, and I'm also the founder of my software company called Charlie Charles. I have experience with different technologies like Swift and iOS, Python, Google Cloud, and today we're going to be talking about Solidity. So essentially, what is Solidity? Let's start with that. It is the language of the Ethereum smart contracts. So what are smart contracts? That's a good question. By the way, like Jose mentioned, if there's any questions, let me know. I'll stop and try to answer them as best as I can. But yeah, what are smart contracts? Think of smart contracts like a digital vending machine. So, a vending machine, you put money into it, usually coins. It has a set of instructions inside that will figure out what to do with the coins with what you put in. It does stuff, and then it spits out usually a candy bar, in our case, transactions. Essentially, that's what a smart contract is. And the basic structure of the Ethereum network is essentially there's many computers that are considered to be nodes. And these nodes have something called the EVM, or the Ethereum virtual machine. Think of the EVM as a special type of terminal that is able to read bytecode, Solidity bytecode specifically, and use that to essentially process and do smart contract things. So let me start sharing my screen so we can get to it. Okay. All right, let's do this. So if you guys want to follow along, go to cryptozombies.io and start in chapter 1. I'm not going to be reading everything because don't want to make this very long, but I'm going to go. I have my own notes here, and I'm going to go through everything, kind of try to explain things that might be pain points, things that might not be as clear to a beginner. And even though this talk is geared towards more beginners and people that are a little bit new to coding, I encourage anyone to follow along if you've never dealt with Solidity. So let me pull up my notes here and let's start. So as the name states, we're going to be working with zombies. Essentially here on the first page, you can create a some pseudo-random zombie, choose different parameters, and essentially the DNA of a zombie, you can think of it as an address, which is what normally we work with in the blockchain, but the zombies have a 16-digit integer for their DNA. So we start with that. So as you can see, these sliders are going to be used to create a DNA. And anyway, that's not super important. So let's actually start coding. So what do we need at first? We need to, let me put up my notes here. All right. So we need to start with the Solidity version. In this case, the tutorial wants us to tell Solidity that the version can be from 5.0 up until 6.0. So the way we write that down is, so we do greater than or equals to 0.5.0 up until, so including 0.6.0. So that should be the Solidity version. Also, each statement in Solidity, you end it with a semicolon. Don't forget that. I sometimes do. So let's create the basic contract. So essentially, the way you create a contract is you write the keyword contract, and you create the name. So the name, you capitalize the first letters of the words. So in this case, it's written hello world with capital H, capital W. So the tutorial is asking us to create a zombie factory. So we'd write zombie factory. And we use curly braces to define the body. And that should be it. Let me move this around, check answer. All right. So that should be pretty simple. Again, let me know if there's any questions. Let's go to the next one. So chapter 3, we're looking at state variables and integers. So essentially integers are numbers, and variables can take the form of any kind of data type that's accepted by Solidity. So integers, strings, arrays, you name it. So, right. So what does the tutorial want us to do? Essentially, it wants us to create an unsigned integer and call it DNA digits, and this integer will have a value of 16. So as it explains here, unsigned integer is essentially a whole number that can't be negative. So let's do that. Normally in when we write Solidity, we put the value type of variable before. So we start with uint. Then we write down the name, so DNA digits. And then we set it equal to 16. And don't forget that semicolon. All right, we got it. So let's go to the next one. Basic math operations. So the same stuff you learn in school, addition, subtraction, multiplication, division. There's one that's might be a little bit tricky if you're not used to writing code, would be the modulus, which is essentially the remainder. So let's say if you try to divide 17 by 3, what would be the modulus? It would be 2, because 3 times 5 is 15. That's the closest you can get to 17 without having a fractional number, and then the remainder is 2. So that would be the modulus. Don't worry about that now. Like that, we won't need to use that until later in the tutorial. So also the other thing is you can do the power of something by adding the 2 asterisk marks. So what does the tutorial want us to do? It wants us to create another unsigned integer that's called DNA modulus. So let's do this. Uint DNA modulus, and essentially wants us to set it equal to 10 to the power of DNA digits. So how do we do that? We do 10 to the power of is 2 asterisk marks, and then DNA digits. And let's check that. There we go. All right, let's go to the next one. So structs. If you've ever seen a class before, a struct is very similar to what a class is. So essentially, it's a more complex object that has multiple properties. Think of it that way. And we'll see an example here. So here it says, struct can be a person, and a person can have, for example, an age and a name. That's how you would define a structure. And obviously, since you're just defining, you're kind of creating this skeleton. When you define a structure, you don't necessarily need to add the values to your variables. So like, for example, here we have an unsigned integer that's age, and there's no age because you're going to define each specific person later on through code. So what does the tutorial want us to do? Right, so we want to create a zombie. So let's do this. Create a struct. Start with the keyword struct, and then create a zombie. So we're going to create a zombie here, and that's going to have 2 properties. It's going to have a string called name, and then yes, called name, add a semicolon, and then the next variable is going to be a uint or unsigned integer called DNA. Let's check that. There we go. Let's go to the next chapter. All right, so the next chapter is arrays. So arrays are essentially a collection of a certain type of variable. So we can we usually define structs. I don't know if you've noticed that if when we're defining variables, we usually add the type before the name, and we're going to do the same thing, almost the same thing here. So let's just go straight into it. So if we want to create a public array of zombies, we essentially start with zombie. When you add an empty brackets to kind of denote that you are creating the array. We set it to public, and we call it zombies. And let me double check that there's nothing I'm missing here. This is the, all right. Oh, and by the way, if you're a little confused about, it explains here that there's two different kinds of arrays. There's a fixed type and a dynamic array. So essentially a fixed array is one that has a defined length, or it's the size of the array is already predetermined. And dynamic array is the opposite of that. So essentially, it can be a variable length or size, and usually a dynamic array will change over time through code. So let's check this out. There we go. Let's move on to the next one. All right, so function declarations here. I don't know if you remember from math class in school, but when you have functions, essentially a function just takes an input, does an operation, spits out a result, or does something. It doesn't need to return anything, but we will see both of those cases very soon. So essentially, what does it want us to do? So it wants us to create a public function called create zombie. So start here. Again, you start with the keyword function. Function, if I can type, function. We call it create zombies. And essentially you open up the parentheses because this is where you're going to define what kinds of inputs the function needs. So essentially, tutorial is telling us that we need two parameters. So essentially, we're going to here we go. We're going to need a string that is called name. Also, it is convention, not required, but it is convention that when you are writing the names of inputs for a function, that you start with an underscore at the beginning of the name. It just makes it easier to read. But it, again, not necessary, but it's recommended that you do that so that other people can look at your code and not have an easier time. So essentially, we have a string called name, and then we have what do we have? The DNA. So that's a string. Oh, sorry, that's a unsigned integer. So uint. Let me see if just make sure I'm good on time. So an unsigned integer. What are we calling it? DNA. So underscore DNA. And it's telling us that the first argument needs to be passed by value by using the memory keyword. Okay. So just making sure I went through everything. Okay. Quick thing, if you're a little bit stuck on the value type versus reference type, essentially, a value type means that when you get an instance of something, that is a unique copy, versus a reference type. So when you get a copy, an instance of something, you are not, you don't have a unique copy. You just have, you're referencing something that was already established, if that makes sense. Don't worry about that too much. That's not super relevant, and I would say it's a more advanced topic for later tutorials. So we're doing create zombie. We're taking in the name and the DNA. All right, let's open up the curly brackets again, curly braces. And that should be it. Let's check it. Oh, let's see. What am I missing? Oh, I am missing. Let me double check here. All right. Oh, I forgot to set it as private. So yeah. And let's see. Oh, and the last thing, another convention that I forgot to mention is that if a function is private, I think there's just, what am I missing? So yeah, if a function is private, essentially, you should also start the name of the function with an underscore at the beginning. That's, again, convention. So let's see, what am I missing? So essentially, we have the string, memory name, UIDs. Okay. Let's see. Oh, that was my mistake. I had an S here. There we go. Has not told us this yet. Right, let's just check the answer. I'm not sure what I'm missing. So, oh, it's a public function. That's why. my mistake. So public function. That's why it was telling me that it was incorrect to mark it as with a underscore here. So there we go. Sorry about that. All right. So now we're going to be working with structs and arrays. So let's go here. So it wants us to start here. Essentially, let me see what notes I have here. One thing that you should keep in mind is that all different types, this is applicable to any language, different types in Solidity have predefined functions, which are things that already exist in the language that you can use to perform actions. So for example, we're going to be talking about the push function, which is essentially a pre-built function that works with arrays already. So you don't need to like define it by yourself. Essentially. All right, so let's see what it wants. It says it's asking us to create, to fill in the function body. So now we're going to actually put in what it does and create a new zombie. So So it's essentially saying that you want to fill in the body. So you create a new zombie, and then you add it to the zombies array. So essentially what you're going to do is you're going to reference the zombies struct, and you're going to do push. So essentially you're going to push in or add in a new zombie. So the way we do that is we call the zombie type, and essentially we define the name, which we're already getting it from the function. So when this function is called, we're going to have these two variables, the name and the DNA. So we're going to have the name, DNA here. And let's see, the name and the DNA. And let's do it in one line of code. So let's see what we're missing. Oh, that's it. So yeah, you just want to have zombies. Essentially where you want to add to the array, you do dot push, use the pre-built, and you put in whatever you're getting from the function. So let's go into chapter 9, private versus public functions. So like it says here, functions are public by default, which means that the definition of the functions can be seen by anyone in the blockchain. Essentially, it's not always what you want. So sometimes you want to make things private. This ties into what I was saying earlier, that it is convention that when you have a private function, you started with the underscore, and then you mark it as private instead of public before the curly braces. So let's do this. we are going to create a function, make a function called, oh, it's already here, the create zombie. So we're just going to change it to private. And make sure we have the convention here. And there we go. So yeah, this one was a pretty simple one. It's just making sure that you understand the convention. All right. Sorry, turning on my AC. So, all right. More information on functions. Pull up my notes here again. So as I was mentioning before, when you have a function, for example, the functions we've seen up till now just do things. They don't come back with anything. They don't return any values. So we're going to be looking at functions that return things. And yeah, let's get into it. So this is an example, but we can just go straight and code it. So we're going to create a public function called generate random data. So let's begin here. Again, we start with the function keyword. Then because it's a private function, we started with an underscore, generate random DNA. Let's open up the curly braces. I like to do that before anything. It's a private, if I can write, private function. And all right, let's add the closure to it so we know what inputs it's getting. So we have a string that's called str, and it returns a uint. So let's write that here. Double check my notes. Yes, it returns a uint, and we put whatever the return type is in a parenthesis. So uint. Here we go. Function will view some of our contracts variables, but not modifying. So let's mark it as a view function. So we add that before the returns, or I guess at the end after you declare private or public. So it's a view function. Yes, and the function body should be empty. So let's check that answer. Let's see what we missed. So we have the let's see what we're missing. We have the function. We have the name with the correct convention. We are looking for a string. Oh, forgot to add the string to memory. There we go. So yeah, let's keep going. See, I'm good. I'm still good on time. All right. So I'm not sure if I'm saying this correctly, but KECAC 256 and typecasting. So this is the next chapter. So the blockchain, a lot of the math behind blockchains has a lot to do with hashes. So think of a hash function. You get something, let's say a number, like 2, 3, 5, whatever. You get a number and you input it into this hash function. The hash function will essentially output a number, a series of numbers of the same length. And that's essentially, it looks like pseudo-random number generation, but essentially each output has a specific, each input has a specific output to this function. So for example, if you put a number 1, you get a bunch of random numbers, but if you put a number 2, it's a very different output. And it's the same for pretty much any kind of input that you can give it. So essentially, think of it as a small change, and the input makes a big change in the output. Let's put that to practice so it's a little bit more clear. So yeah, that's what the hash functions kind of do. And then typecasting is essentially when you take something and you're converting it from one type to the other. So in this case, we're going to be converting something to unsigned integer. So let's get to it. So it says we need to fill in the body of the generate random DNA function. Sorry about that. And let's get to it. Okay. So generate random data. All right. So the first thing that we need to do is get the hash of the string that's is being inputted into the function. So the way you call that is you start by calling the name of the function, which is also a pre-built function. You don't need to define its behavior. You call it, and you open up the parentheses. So what we're going to put in here is a string, but we can't just get the string and throw it in there because it's not going to know what to do with it. We need to tell it what to do. And what we're going to tell it to do is to essentially turn it into bytecode. I think I mentioned this at the beginning, but essentially the Ethereum virtual machine reads bytecode, and it uses that bytecode to for compiling purposes, and it's able to understand that. So we need to convert it into bytecode. So the way we do that is we call the ABI, and we use the encoded packets, and then we essentially call this. We input the string or the str, the stir, and all right. Yes, so that's essentially what we need to do to get the hash. So obviously we need to store this into a variable, or otherwise we're not really doing anything with it. So let's call this this is going to be a uint, and it's called rand. Let's put a semicolon here. And all right, do I need to do anything else? And we want our DNA to only be 16 digits long. So the second line of code should return, return the above value module. Okay, so essentially what we're going to do is we're going to return the same variable we just defined, rand, for random, and we're going to calculate the modulus of between this and the DNA modulus. All right, let's check that. All right, see what mistakes we made. Encode. Am I making a spelling mistake again? Let's see. Oh yeah, it's encode, not encoded. Packed. Okay, my bad. Can't type. Let's see. All right, let's see what is the other mistake. So let's go through it again. We have the unsigned integer. We have it's called rand. Oh, and we are typecasting. This is what we forgot. So the way you typecast is you take the name of the type that you want to change into it, and if it's a valid conversion, then it'll work. So let's try it again. There we go. So yeah, we take all of that and we wrap it inside the uint function, and essentially that typecasts the bytecode into an integer, basically a number. So let's keep it going. We're almost done. So let's start putting it together. All right. So let's create a public function. So what do? We start with function, and then we put the name of the function. It's not private, so we don't need to use the convention of the underscore. So we do create. Oh, my bad. Create random zombie. We add a parentheses so we can define the inputs. All right, so we need to add a string called name, and then we're gonna have and that's the location is memory. Which quick reminder, memory means that it won't be stored in the blockchain. So yeah, we have the name, and then is that it? Oh yeah, that's it. So the function is a public function, and that is the wrong kind of brackets, curly braces. Here we go. And all right, so it says that the first line of the function should run generate random DNA on using the name And that needs to be stored as an unsigned integer called random data or rand data. So let's do that. An unsigned integer called rand DNA. And so what do? We essentially we do underscore generate random data, and then we input the name, and we close it with a semicolon. And then what else does it want us to do? It wants us to what else? Oh, I was doing the first line. Okay, so the second line, it says the second line should run the create zombie function and pass it the name and the DNA. All right, so create zombie. We're gonna put in the name and the rand data that we just created. Oh, rand DNA. I keep calling it DNA. Just ignore me. So let's try it out. There we go. And I think we're down to the last chapter. And by the way, I'm running through this pretty quick so that I can tackle any questions you might have at the end. And we can go back to any chapter. So last thing we need to do is essentially create an event. So remember that the blockchain, even though Solidity is a powerful language, it can do pretty much anything that other languages can do. It is limited in the scope of things it knows. So, for example, the blockchain only has access to the information that's in the contracts, and it normally shouldn't be connected to the internet, for example, to query things from APIs to get information on let's say what the price of Ethereum is, or what things that are happening as information that might be relevant to certain smart contracts. This would be a security problem, because you can't have the blockchain be connecting to different points of the internet, because that might introduce any malicious code. So what we do instead is we have oracles. We have oracles are essentially think of it as a service that's provides curated data specifically for blockchains, so that blockchains don't need to do this data acquisition themselves, and it's more secure. So essentially what that ties into is we can do events. So as it says here, events are a way for your contract to communicate that something has happened to the blockchain, on the blockchain to your app front end. So the way events work is that we need to declare an event, and then the event needs to be emitted. So let's get on to that. So we're going to create the event on top here. All right, so let's do this. How much time do I have? All right, I have 8 minutes. Let's finish this quick. So we are going to create a new event called new zombie. So essentially this event is going to be triggered every time a new zombie is created. So it wants us, it should pass an integer, the zombie ID, a name, that's a string, and the DNA, so another string, another integer. So let's do that. Uint called the zombie ID. Then we have a string called name, and then we have another integer, an unsigned integer called DNA. So don't forget to add the semicolon. Oh, that's it for this line. And then it says it wants us to modify the create zombies function to fire the new zombie events after adding the new zombie to, sorry about that, the arrays. So start over here. So essentially we're going to emit, we're going to emit Oh, damn it, here we go. A new zombie with the ID, which we're going to define in a moment. It's going to take in the name and the DNA, which are the inputs of this function already. So the one that we haven't accounted for is the ID, which we're going to do right now. So DNA, all right. And now it wants us to, says you're going to need the zombies ID .array.push to return an unsigned integer. Yes, all right. So essentially it returns an unsigned integer of the new length of the array. And because the first item already has index 0, this is pretty standard for counting numbers and code, you need to add a -1. And that will make the index of the new zombie that we just added. Let's code it up so it makes more sense. All right, so essentially we need to convert this code that we have here already. We need to add an unsigned integer. It's called ID. That's what we're missing. And essentially we already have this code. It pushes the new zombie into the array, and then we just add the -1 to make sure that we're counting things right. And let's try that out. There we go. And okay, so at least for my part, I'm done. Essentially, this part just shows you some things you can do with web3.js, which is the JavaScript library that one uses to build decentralized applications, do different things with the Solidity smart contracts. So let me see here if I have any questions.
No questions, Carlos. Thank you for joining us. It's a very enlightening discussion. I know I had problems figuring out what the heck a strut was, but thankfully you were around. And yeah, I mean, I'm opening it up for any final comments you have, okay?
All right. Oh, there we go. So yeah, one of the, let me see, some tips I could give to beginners for picking up Ethereum. I would say look at different examples of what other blockchains are doing, not just Ethereum. Like Ethereum is I would say probably the biggest smart contract framework that the biggest smart contract blockchain that we have, but there are definitely others that have implemented their own smart contracts in different ways. Actually, Riley was mentioning that there was a question about Cardano earlier, and actually Cardano is rumored to be releasing their framework for smart contracts recently. So that's something to be excited about. Another thing is this tutorial, the Crypto Zombies thing that we just went through, is there's a bunch of other tutorials. So I would suggest that everyone, if you're very interested in this, do the other tutorials. They're very enlightening. And then go ahead and just start practicing. Look at, I would recommend that if you're really serious about this, you could go into just the GitHub pages of the different teams. So for example, let's pick a random one, Uniswap. All these coins started from a contract that was deployed in the Ethereum blockchain. So you can just start looking at those contracts. Like these are all public, and you can see the different parameters that each team has defined for their own coins. For example, if you look at the Uniswap protocol, they're on version 3. Remember, once you upload a contract to the Ethereum blockchain, it's stuck there. So if you need to update, you either make a new version or you add other contracts to add functionality. And it's a whole world. I would encourage to go through these tutorials and then just start looking at code. Start looking at code, and don't be afraid to deploy anything. There's test networks. You can deploy stuff, practice sending things, and start working on little contracts. It's the future, and it's very exciting. Also, if you want to get in touch with me, my Twitter handle is House of Carle. That's my last name. And yeah, I'm very happy to be here. Jose, is there anything else you want me to do before I go?
No, you can just pass it back to me. That's fine.
All right, let me do that. Let me stop screen sharing.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Carlos, once more. And in just a few minutes, we will be having our next session, a fireside chat with friends of Puerto Rico, and I will be presenting them shortly. So that is scheduled for 2:45, and I will see you guys just a few minutes before that. Okay? See you soon. All right, everyone. Thank you for patiently waiting. For our next session, we're going to have a fireside chat with friends of Puerto Rico, moderated by our none other than Yamilet Romero, public relations intern at Blockchain Puerto Rico, and including our special guest, Ms. Claudia Quesada, communication strategist for Friends of Puerto Rico. All right, so you'll be seeing them in just a few seconds. One moment, please.
Hi. Hi guys, my name is Jamilet. As Jose said before, I'm an intern for Blockchain Puerto Rico, and this is Claudia.
Excuse me, Claudia, you seem to be in mute. You need to unmute yourself.
So sorry, here again. Well, my name is Claudia Quesada. I am the Communications and Development Coordinator for Friends of Puerto Rico.
Well, we shall begin. First, I want to ask Claudia, what is Friends of Puerto Rico and what do you do?
Yes, well, Friends of Puerto Rico is a 501c3 nonprofit focused on helping women and children just develop their entrepreneurship ideas. An example of this right now on our Seeds program, this is a program for kids from ages 9 to 12. We have 25 kids that already have their own businesses, and we help them to create these from start to finish. So it's been an amazing year for these kids and for us.
Awesome. And Claudia, how do you think Bitcoin can help build the future of Puerto Rico, and how do you think the women and girls can benefit from it?
Yes, well, I think that this is a great step for Puerto Rico just for creating new opportunities. Example, we have this new opportunity to accept these type of donations in our nonprofit, taking consideration the needs and the interests of our donors, and just creating this opportunity that not only benefits what we do with our nonprofit, but also benefits the people who are donating that we appreciate so much. Also, I just wanted to say that for our women and children, this is a great opportunity because I feel like we're in a time that is changing so much that it's very important for us to give them the right tools for them to succeed in life. And I believe that this is a great information for them to have to just be great at what they do.
And you told us before that you are working with 25 kids, right? That have their own businesses. And my question to you is, the kids that you are working with right now, are they learning to use Bitcoin for their businesses?
Yes, well, at the moment they are not, but I do think that it would be a great opportunity for them to just learn a bit about this and help them just develop their ideas, taking in consideration cryptocurrency. So I think it would be a great idea for the future of the organization to just incorporate it.
You said that you are taking as donations Bitcoin. So I wanted to ask also, how long have you been taking Bitcoin's donations, and where this idea came from?
Yes, well, for us, our donors are very important. If it weren't for them, we weren't be able to do all of the things we're doing right now. So for us, it's very important to listen to them and know what they want, what they like. So that's how this all started, adding crypto donations to our platform. And right now, for the moment, yes, we are accepting donations. It's just been a few months that we've been doing it.
Okay, great. Also, why do you accept Bitcoins? Why you decided to accept Bitcoins right now?
Yes, we saw that a lot of our donors are very interested in this. So we thought it would be great for us to just incorporate something that they really feel passionate about and they really believe in. So for us, it's great because it gives us new opportunities to grow.
And have you received any Bitcoins donations or not?
Yes, at the moment we have not, but we are welcome to any donations people want to give Friends of Puerto Rico.
Perfect. So, are they something you hold, or do you immediately like sell for money? I know that right now you haven't have the opportunity to get donations on Bitcoins, but if it was the case, how will you manage that?
Yes, well, at the moment, since we are starting this process and we really want to make the right decisions, this is something that we are right now taking in consideration. And as a group and with professionals, we would like to make the right decision for everyone. So at the time, that is something that we are working on.
Thank you, Claudia. I think your organization is doing an excellent job with these kids that represent the future of Puerto Rico, and hopefully they can, give us a push to all Puerto Ricans and businesses also, local businesses. If any of you have any questions, please let us know. Jose is going to put it on the screen so we can read it and Claudia can answer it. Also, we will have available the link if you want to donate in Bitcoins. Jose is also going to put that on screen. And if you can't do it right now, but you are still interested, we are going to have the link on all blockchain Puerto Rico platforms. So you can go, click, and donate.
Yes, thank you so much. We are very excited, and this is something that is going to help and benefit everyone. So I'm very glad and grateful to be a part of this. Thank you so much to both of you guys. And if you have any questions or just want to contact me, I'm sure that Jose can share my information for anyone who's interested.
Definitely. Well, any one of you viewers have any questions so Claudia can answer? We have time left, so I think we can answer some of your questions.
Hey guys, Jose here. There doesn't seem to be any questions from the audience. If you guys want to finish early, you're welcome to. Otherwise, you guys can give your concluding thoughts, and yeah, we can call it a day.
Thank you so much, Jose. Well, as I mentioned, if anyone in the next few days wants to get in contact with me and just talk a bit more or interested in the program, we are open to anyone who's interested. So just think about it. Friends of Puerto Rico is an amazing nonprofit that is helping with our Seeds program. That is a program, a 1-year program for kids from 9 to 12, as I mentioned, just to create their own businesses, they are the future of Puerto Rico, as you mentioned. And just to mention the other program we have, Amigas, it's a great networking worldwide program for women who are just developing their own businesses and want to grow and want to meet other women and just give support to each other. As you can see, Friends of Puerto Rico has many positive things that I think is great.
Yes, I agree. I don't have nothing to add, but yes, I think our conference is done from now.
Okay. Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I will leave you guys with Mr. Carlos Gomez and Cero X.
Hey, hello everyone. I'm Carlos Gomez from Miami. Thanks also for the introduction. And hi, Sarakis. How are you?
I'm good, and you?
Not too bad, not too bad. Thank you. We had a quite exciting topic today at the conference. We're going to talk about decentralized finance. So, how exciting is that?
It's super exciting, especially the fact that the decentralized finance have come to completely disrupt the centralized entities. One of the two aspects, the most important aspect regarding to decentralized finance is the fact that it's decentralized, and what that means. All the governance structure and all the aspects that manage the code and the movement of value are already written in code. And in centralized entities, you have many different players that are taking a piece of the business and grabbing from the revenue. In decentralized finance, you eliminate all of the middlemen, and now the users are in control. The users and the value creators, which are the developers.
Absolutely. That's quite just by changing the business model, we just create value for the users, because
Absolutely.
that chunk that used to be carried away by the middleman, it's now to be shared or to be distributed among the user for platforms. So just by that, now we are adding value. So this is quite an exciting development. So it's so exciting. It's very easy to be carried away and start to talk about topics that are highly complex and highly sophisticated. But for the benefit of the audience, so let's go back a little bit to the basics. So I would like to mention that decentralized finance it's a concept that was pretty much rise into the mainstream early last year.
Yes.
Obviously, the first entrepreneurs and the first adopters were talking about years before. But was it 2020, the first quarter of the 2020, when suddenly I was just checking my charts and I start checking about the gas price in the Ethereum protocol and say, oh, what's going on here? And then you start receiving news about this new concept of decentralized finance, which basically is everything you can do in the centralized financial system. For example, thanks to the banks. So you can deposit money if you are excedentary, or you can hope to get a loan if you have some deficit of fund. All these activities, you can do it in a decentralized environment, and we're going to talk about more in detail. But basically, that was something that came out of the blue. Do you have any personal experience around, let's go back in time, around March or April 2020, just starting about the pandemic, the world was upside down, nobody thought what to do, what would happen 2 weeks in the future, but then suddenly we get this benefit. So do you have any personal experience with a protocol or something that happened in your life, in your professional life back in that time? Because for me, that was simply boom, they came out of the blue. So that was fascinating.
For me, this technology remind me a lot of the times where I used to play around with things like LimeWire. You know, that all that ability of getting information and resources from the internet in a pretty much decentralized way, because it was a decentralized way of peer protocol, P2P protocol.
Okay.
And basically having that on the financial side of it gave me a lot of excitement. Now you can control your own money. Now you can interact with different applications in a permissionless way, and while keeping all the control and custody of your money, instead of relying on a third party, with just like with the centralized finance.
It's true. Well, not only in central finance, because if we talk about the development, we got the banks, which are the most traditional middlemen of the financial system.
Yes.
Then the world developed into the fintech and these Squirrel, these agile, very very dynamic small companies that grow huge. But now we move into the crypto world. But one of the things about the crypto world, for example, that when we talk about the exchanges, so one of the mechanisms to transfer our fiduciary currency into cryptocurrencies, well, the traditional exchanges are still technically a middleman, a centralized middleman. The only difference is that they're run by people who we believe the things similar to us. But when you think about it, they operate in a centralized fashion. So
Absolutely.
now with this DeFi world, so you spot on when you said that in addition to all the benefits, reducing the middleman, be more dynamic, control your own finance, you mentioned something important about the custody. So in DeFi protocols, you are the full custodian of your assets. So you can interact with other people on a peer-to-peer basis. You can do certain financial transactions, but however, in most of the cases, you are in control of your own cryptocurrencies. Can you develop a little bit more for the benefit of the audience what that means? Be your own custodian, because that's important.
Well, it's really important to be in control of your own money, because let's face it, institutions have been really corroded, and the trust on centralized entities has been a diminishing thing with the passing of time. So having this technology and being able to not only trust but verify and have certainty of what's true allow us to be more humans at the end of the day, because now we remove a trust layer and we can just engage in business. And when this is applied to finance, is a beautiful thing. You can do it on yourself. You can do it by yourself. You don't need know your customer rules, So it's a pretty inclusive technology. Anybody in the world can use it. And when talking about exchanges, this is one of the most important aspects of decentralized finance. There's two different ways of providing liquidity on a decentralized exchange, and that's one of the most beautiful things. Wait a second.
Sure.
Okay, so with the advent of with the creation of Uniswap, I think that's what opened up everything, and decentralized exchanges became the best way of doing things, of exchanging value in a decentralized way. It's such a superior way of doing it when you compare it with a centralized exchange. In fact, that the incentivation process is tailored towards the user and the value creators, which are the developers, instead of answering to board members or investors exclusively, which is the way that centralized exchanges work and operate.
Yes, that's right. I can see two huge things with the advent of Uniswap, for example. So the first one, in addition to that, you are your own custodian. So you can, like, free, literally, you can download a wallet in your browser and you can hold your Ether just right there for free. You don't have to pay anything. You have to pay for transactions, obviously, but to create a wallet and be your own custodian is absolutely free. So you can connect your wallet with this protocol Uniswap. And the Uniswap, to me, as a person having been involved in crypto for a while, it brings more benefit. Firstly, if you have a project that you issue your own token, let's assume that you provide value to people and you want to, distribute it as a utility token, and you want your token to be listed in a centralized exchange. Well, you face a similar bureaucracy that you face in the traditional financial system. So you have to convince the owner of the exchange, you have to pay a huge fee to be listed, and then hoping that your token will be listed in a major exchange and then get traded in a secondary market. The other thing is that in centralized exchanges, you can hold your tokens in an exchange, but however, if it's not one of the, let's face it, one of the top 10, you're not going to have enough liquidity to have a competitive price for your transaction.
Absolutely.
So with Uniswap, there are two things. So one, if you create your token using certain standard, let's say ERC20 in the Ethereum protocol, you can list it straight away in Uniswap and create a pair. The pair will be obviously your token and Ether, for example. So that allows you to straight away as a project to put out there in the market like, just your project. And people, if they believe in you, if they believe in your idea, they can just simply trade your token for Ether. And that's fantastic. And you don't have to pay anything. You don't have to convince anyone. That's great.
It became an optimal way of bootstrapping a project, basically.
Yes. So it's not up to you. You're not going to have that boom gate that you have to convince a gatekeeper to go out there in the market. So now you can go right there and then convince the market, which is up to you. So that's great. And the second thing, you mentioned that, so I think it would be very good if we invest a little bit of time on that. You mentioned something about liquidity. Liquidity is very important because obviously that reduces friction in the price, that allows more people to trade a token, to get in or get out very quickly if they want. So it's a good thing. Liquidity is a fantastic thing for any asset in any market. So what happened is now we have Uniswap. Uniswap have this facility, the technical facility to connect liquidity pools and incentivize people to put money into the liquidity pools for the reward. So it's a beautiful ecosystem that allows people with funds to get a reward for providing liquidity and people who need liquidity to get there straight away. So it's a great idea.
Absolutely. And I find that is a genius implementation. And right now there's two ways of implementing decentralized exchanges. There's the way that the approach that Uniswap is taking, which is a AMM, where there's a pair of tokens, right? Two pools where, like you said, you can provide your project token and an Ethereum and make a pool. Mm-hmm. But there's also book order exchanges, which operate with a centralized exchange structure, but they keep the decentralized aspect at the same time. So we need to be clear about that there's two different types of exchanges operating on the blockchain, basically. Okay. And both offer different advantages and disadvantages, basically.
Okay. So thanks for that. So moving into, let's we discussed the historical reasons why we developed this technology. We talk a little bit about how it works, but now let's assume that someone wants to get in. So I'm as a new user, I want to get into the DeFi world. So I download my MetaMask wallet, for example. I get some Ether there, and then I choose. Let's say that I have some liquidity, I have funds, and I want to get a reward for that. What should I do?
All right. So right now, at this very moment, if you don't have that much capital, I actually don't recommend being on Ethereum because the fees are gonna eat away your gains. Okay. So right now, I will be aiming for Polygon Matic, which is a EVM compatible chain, which means that all the applications that are written for Ethereum will run perfectly on Polygon, but at a faster transaction speed and with a lower transaction fee. That way, when you're farming or doing any actions within the protocol, you get to keep more of your gains because you're paying less fees.
Of course.
Within those protocols, my favorite application to earn passive income is Beefy Finance.
Okay.
And Yearn Finance, both of them.
How that work, for example? So in basic terms, you go there and what happens?
All right. So let's say you want to earn money on your ETH, right? You can go on Yearn Finance and look for a strategy that implements ETH. And there's many strategies that actually offer different yields. And just like Yearn, there's Beefy Finance. And when you put your money on your tokens on a platform like Beefy Finance and Yearn, what it does is that those applications run automated strategies for you. So instead of you grabbing your ETH and putting it on X platform and then getting the rewards from that platform, reinvesting them to make more ETH, the platform can do it by itself. You don't have to think about it. You just have to trust the platform. And the best way to do it is to not just rely on one platform. Look for 3 or 4 reliable platforms that have trust, developers that can be trusted, that are public and have a reputation to protect, and basically spread everything around those applications.
So it's following the basic concept and principle of diversification in traditional finance. So don't put your eggs in the same basket.
Exactly, but taking into consideration the security assurances that it's not just. It doesn't happen often, especially with applications like Compound, Aave, Yearn. Those applications have proven to be pretty reliable over time, but still it's a pretty nascent technology, and we need to be careful. So we distribute that risk among different dApps.
Okay. So basic principle. Okay, following. So this is not obviously investment advice. We're talking here. So basically, what I'll do is simply don't put all my eggs in one basket. So I'll look for, let's say, 3 or 4 protocols I can trust. And for example, things I'll look is that how established in the market, how valued they have locked into the protocol, if they have been independently audited, because that's interesting. In traditional finance, when you look for companies to invest, one of the things that you look is that if the financial statement have been audited by a third-party independent audit firm, one of the called Big Four. So the issuer report says that, everything that you're seeing there reflects the reality. Here's interesting because there is a new industry, a new cottage industry of very clever companies that they provide audit to protocols. So they basically try to hack all the protocols in a legal way, and they try to find, a risk for them. And then if they found it, they recommend remediation. So once you get a protocol that have been fully audited, then that's an additional level of comfort, so to speak, that the platform will be less likely to be hacked. So that's another important reflection here, because this technology brings risk.
Absolutely. Also, it's good to verify if it's a new application, since there are so many forks. A fork is when you grab an application like Uniswap and you grab the code from Uniswap and just make a new application just like Uniswap and stamp a new name on it. Many programmers do that as a way of a cash grab, or just they want to make a new different dApp and they're legit. So you need to verify if the forked code was previously audited. That's important, especially if the project is new. And the team, basically. The audits are important, don't get me wrong, but I have seen many times projects are audited having exploits. Exploits anyway. So even if it's important, you need to be really careful. That's why the distributing risk is really important.
Yeah, okay. You mentioned, can you hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I'm back. You mentioned something about Ethereum, about the gas fee. That's really important because at the moment, the network is so congested. So there's so many people trying to get their transactions verified in the same block, that the gas fee or the price you pay to get your transaction verify it's really high, and they can eat your profits as you mentioned.
Absolutely.
So there are alternatives. If you go Polygon, which is a relatively new platform that offer the benefits of be able to read all the application reading in Solidity, which is the Ethereum native language, and then they offer speed transaction and very lower fees. But are there any other big or important platforms so people can look at? Because we discussed Ethereum is the most common known one. Are any other ones that you think that it's worth watching?
Phantom.
Okay.
Phantom is EVM compatible, which is Ethereum virtual machine compatible.
Okay.
Which means that it can run dApps that are built for Ethereum.
Yes.
And that one is faster than Polygon. It runs on a different consensus algorithm, so it reaches the consensus in a different way. And it's more efficient. It's cheaper. It's faster. It has a transaction finality of 1 second. It's even superior to Polygon. It's still pretty underappreciated. And it's growing. It's growing in adoption too.
Okay, well, I didn't know that. Thanks for that. Well, what about the Binance Smart Chain? There's a lot of people talking about it. Do you know something about these protocols?
Yes,
because it's very popular.
Yes, I actually participated on PancakeSwap since very early. I like Binance Smart Chain. I have a few problems with Binance Smart Chain, and it's the fact that there's a lot of developers there basically rug pulling. If people don't know what rug pull is when a project initiate there's a question about rug pulls.
Yes, obviously. It's an interesting topic, yeah.
All right, so rug pull is when the developers remove liquidity out of nowhere, and they just take the money and run. Basically,
they simply dump the token. It's pretty much in layman's terms. Is that accurate? Okay.
Yes. So, to prevent that, there's ways to prevent rug pulls. There's actually ways of verifying if the project has rug pull proof code, basically. In the way that permissions are allocated on the developer's wallet. So if that's an assignment that you need to do every time you get into a project to verify how are the permissions distributed among the developers, how is the token distribution on the project, how much of a percentage the team keeps, how much of a percentage is allocated to investors. That's really important to look at when you're analyzing a project where you are considering to put your money into.
Absolutely. It's like the extreme example of Casper. If I don't remind, literally, they got a lot of money, but they only sold a small percentage of the pie. So it's amazing how people are pulling money into something that the developers are keeping more than 80% or something like that. So that's interesting. So that's a weak fundamental in my humble point of view. So as you mentioned, when you're trying to get into this protocol, there's a lot of research, there's a lot of homework that you should do to protect your or minimize the risk of suffering a loss.
Basically, on this industry, we're replacing all the due diligence that the bankers do by themselves on behalf of the users, and we just have to do it ourselves. That responsibility relies upon the user, right? But at the same time, we're getting benefits that far outweighs having money on a centralized system. So it's a way of exchanging benefits. I think it's a full benefit because everybody should learn about managing their own finances. It's not a minus to actually learn and get better at it. I think everybody should be empowered, and everybody should take care of their own finances.
Well, it's like with great power, great responsibility. So now,
absolutely.
Yeah, similar that you shouldn't rely on anyone for your password of your wallet. You shouldn't rely on anyone to do the due diligence and the homework for you before getting into something. So that's good. Let me change the gear here, T-Rex, and let's talk about another topic involving DeFi, obviously, and it's in regards to the stable coins. So this type of new coins, well, they're new to DeFi. They have been before that, but they are getting like a new birth or a new function, very important in terms of DeFi protocol. So this USDT token or DAI, for example, what can you tell us about it? So what are the function and how they work? Because it's very popular and it's very important to know DAI at least if you are using a Polygon or an Ethereum protocol.
Absolutely. So stablecoins play a really important role within DeFi in the fact that allow us to go into positions and out of positions, having a certainty, a stable coin, basically, a money currency that doesn't fluctuate in value like the other cryptocurrencies. So it's really important to have stable coins running on decentralized finance. The problem comes when you have protocols that don't have an appropriate way of collateralizing the peg of the value of the stable coin, because there's different types of stable coins. There's USDT, which is supposed to be backed by a basket of money or assets.
US dollars. Yeah.
Yes. And then you have USDC, which aims to do the same. But then on the other side, you have Maker, which uses a basket of assets, of digitalized assets, including USDC, to achieve the value of VI, to keep it pegged to $1.
Yeah. So it's interesting because even though that we are trying to get away from the dollar concept of the dollar reserve function, we still, to be able to achieve certain things, one, enter and getting out position, we still need something that resembles the value of $1 in order to make our accounting easy to understand and to really know if we're doing well or not. So it's interesting that even though that we have get a long way from that, we still need like this unit of account of $1 to be able to, I don't know, understand what we're doing.
Yeah, it has to do with the fact that the US dollar is the one that runs the world, basically, is the world reserve, and the world runs on buying food with the US dollar for many people and funding businesses. So that assurance of having funding is what gives importance to the stable coins on the blockchain, basically.
Absolutely. The dollar as a world reserve is without a doubt that's a fact, but that's another reflection in Bitcoin, for example, that would be relatively easy from the technological point of view to create like a wrapped Bitcoin, and it is that should be able to function as a stable coin, but that's impossible because the virtue and the nature of Bitcoin doesn't allow to have this certainty that we need to achieve certain objectives in DeFi. So I think that's another reflection. Yeah.
Yes, basically the US dollar is the ruler to measure value internationally, and that's the only reason it's being kept. It's not the most efficient one, because actually it's a leakage of energy. It doesn't store energy efficiently, like you know what? I don't know if you know about Michael Saylor and the concept he has about storing energy on preserving energy, saving energy. So eventually the US dollar is going to get phased out because this is superior money. It's just superior.
Yeah, obviously it's, in my opinion, I agree with you, it's a matter of time. So it's, that sounds extreme what I'm about to say, but let's say in 10 years time, I was having a lunch with my friend. He's of my own age and he has a little kid. The kid is 10 years old. So I asked him a question. I said, he works at a bank. I said, Mike, do you think that in 10 years time, your son would enter a bank branch as you and I used to do years ago? I said, well, absolutely zero chance of that. So I said, well, okay, you know where we're going at. And I think now you know that you should be looking for a job in another industry, which is this one. So I think it's this idea, this whole idea of having this world currency as we know right now, it's going to be fading away with the time. And that's thanks to the fact that demographic will be changing, and the younger generation will be taking more positions in position of power and making decision making surrounding this concept. So I think that's inevitable, and this is something that not many people talk about because people say, oh, well, there's the energy, there is regulation, and we're going to talk about regulation now, but People, when they try to forecast what's going to happen in the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, they don't talk about demographics. And this is something that it's almost impossible to ignore, because it would happen. It will happen. The millennials will get older. The Gen X will be very older. So this generational shift is going to move into the pyramid, population pyramid, and then the adoption will be easier, because people would actually, soon enough, we're going to have people that will burn after the Bitcoin creation. So I think that's really important.
Absolutely. I love the point that you're bringing. The value that we give regular letters, because we grew on that. We grew up on a big part of our life was basically not digital, right? I get that point that absolutely the newer generations have close to zero interaction with analog technology. So this is a pretty much a no-brainer for them.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's a
so
natural way.
Now let's now that we transition into the future, into a forward-looking conversation about DeFi, there's a lot of conversation about tough and strong regulation, especially coming from the United States. What are your views about that? I have mine, but
about the regulations?
Yes, about the flavor of the way that the regulators here in Capitol Hill are going to take in terms of DeFi and Bitcoin. Why not? But let's talk about DeFi.
All right. So here's my take on that. My take is that they should grab all the rules that they built for the traditional finance and dump them on a garbage can. All right. This is an entire different game that demands different rules and regulations that can and they cannot use the traditional finance as a frame to create those rules, because it definitely is gonna mess with innovation and the growth of this industry. So anything about regulation has to take into consideration as a basis this technology. They cannot go back and borrow regulation from the traditional finance, because it just doesn't work. And we have been seeing that lately with politicians trying to put ideas, and those ideas all are derived from traditional finance. So unless they take that into consideration, I don't see it. I don't see it happening in a smooth way.
Excellent. Before we continue with that, I think we got a question from the audience. I think Jose wants to share with us the question. Okay, the dollar. Okay, it's interesting. The dollar used to be backed by gold. Yes. Now, do you think that in the future, one day, the dollar will be backed by crypto?
Yes, absolutely. I think there's a representative, Cynthia Loomis.
Yes.
Yes. I think she has dabbled the idea of having the currency being backed by Bitcoin.
Okay.
I think that's one of the new tricks up the sleeve of the centralized banks. I think they will look to grab Bitcoin and make a derivative of Bitcoin, basically. Just bring dollars out of Bitcoin, just like they did with gold. You remember back in the day?
Well, yeah. Well, I didn't remember. I remember learning about that. And as you mentioned that we should take all the regulation and put it in the rubbish bin, I had that discussion with my wife, and I say a lot of the books are in my bookshelf from my uni years. So that was more than 20 years ago. I think they should get the same fate, because there is a lot of theories that are not going to work really soon. Central banks and the Bank of International Settlement, with all these cross-border payment facilities that now are really easy and absolutely easy to adopt and to transact, that's a huge challenge. So let's go back about the topic about the regulation, because this is critical. Because in the mind of a lot of people, at least in the institutional investor who still hold the big chunk of the money into the investment world, we somehow want them to come here and to get a chunk of the crypto world. And to be able to do that, still, unfortunately, we still have to lure them to put a word with something that it's logic to them. So I think one of the things that we're trying is just to get politicians to understand, and we're trying to advise and to provide advice to them. And some of them are listening, and have been quite successful. For example, I'm living in Miami right now, and as you know, the world famous Francis Suarez mayor, he's very good and very vocal in trying to take the use of an adoption of cryptocurrency into his city, and I've been very successful. So hopefully now with all the mining drama that's happening in another country, so he also offered to facilitate the bringing of these mining facilities into the United States and using excess of energy here in Florida. I don't know how feasible it is. I'm not an expert in energy, but so we still some lights at the end of the tunnel. And I think the young politicians, so again, back to my demographic theory, you know that Francis Suarez is one of the younger rock stars in the U.S. politics. So I think there is hope. There is hope about that, and I truly hope that the United States and Puerto Rico, of course, embrace the technology, because I think we need to give the right signal still for the institutional money to come here.
Absolutely. I think the best way of getting everybody on board basically is to have them vested on this, because when you interact with this and you're vested on it, you are able to develop a conception of value, a true and honest conception of value, and that will affect your judgment. Suddenly
Yes.
your ability of creating legislation will not derive from the amount of money that was donated to your campaign, but because of the fact that you have tokens and you're vested and you're actually using it, and it's better than centralized finance. It's a pretty easy outcome, because you will be helping the people and helping yourself, which is an entirely new concept.
Yeah. Just to wrapping up, so start wrapping up here. So if you think about it, because I like to make analogies, so everything we're talking for the benefit of the people. If you think about it, you talk about a decentralized exchange, you talk about all the benefits that you can do peer-to-peer. So basically what you're saying is that every single user of a DeFi protocol, it's its own central banking system.
Absolutely.
So you can do from your computer and with a few lines of code, technically everything that a central bank with all the SWIFT, with all the cables, with all the brick and mortar infrastructure sometimes needs to achieve the same thing. So do you think that the peer-to-peer is a wonderful concept? So that everybody will be able to be from a sovereign point of view, do whatever they want. Do you think that there's still need for something higher to overlook and to monitor everything that we're doing, or it's absolutely unnecessary, and we have proven that for all these years?
Well, there's some ways that there's different approaches. I don't know if you know about Aragon.
Yes.
All right, so Aragon is aiming to build like a judicial system on the blockchain. I think the answer of regulating the blockchain has to be something close to Aragon.
Okay.
Right? In terms that you will have people deployed along the blockchain, and they will take care of all the legal aspects. I think that should be the frame, because it will be a native solution instead of outsiders looking to trim and mold everything based on their taste.
It's interesting that, Shirex, because I'm a lawyer by trade, so I think you're spot on what you just said, because if we develop from the concept of a smart contract, which is the underlying concept of everything that we're doing. So at the end of the day, all these protocols are one or several smart contracts working together to achieve something. So the word contract within the name smart contract is not semantic. So what I mean by that is that it's actually a contract, not made by two people on paper, but someone using code. So I think the new way to resolve some of our commercial issues, at least the commercial issues, should be using that type of facilities. So having like a judiciary system into the ether, or into the blockchain, it's something that I see with great eyes. And if we start getting used to that, we don't need a tribunal, we don't need a judge, we don't need a court, and we can just simply resolve our issues on a peer-to-peer basis using the code and knowing what we just commit to,
Mhm.
I think that will be a way more efficient way to resolve commercial disputes, and I think will bring more value to the end user, because now that's another area of the commerce, of the world commerce, that the middleman is taking a huge chunk of the pie.
Absolutely. I even think that even person to person, like real life problems, will be solved on the blockchain, because you will be
Yes.
able to have, let's say, lawyers. You will be able
Yes.
to have them on the blockchain, and randomly you will be able to grab mediators and have them incentivized by a tokenomic, uh, by a token structure. A tokenization. You tokenize the protocol and the
Yes.
process, and you're able to incentivize all the players within. You know, so you will be able to incentivize the lawyers or mediators, and you will be able to penalize the bad actors too.
Of course, that's important. And moving along to another positive topic. Where in your view are this sub industry? No, sorry, let me rephrase. Using the application of a decentralized finance protocols, what in your view are the industries that are the next beneficiaries of these wonderful technologies? I can name real estate, for example, to name a few. In your view, what will be the next cutting edge and top applications of these protocols?
All right, so I think the hottest thing will be social things, and
Okay.
one of the projects that I find really interesting. Let me. I don't remember the name of the project right now, but I know what it does. It
Okay.
basically, imagine if you can tag your luxury items on a Instagram post,
Okay.
right? So you will be able to say to the people and to the world, this is a legit product. I bought it
Right.
and it's certified on the blockchain. So that certification and social aspect going together are going to spark a huge new market. You will be able to sell stuff peer to peer and to eliminate counterfeits. So I think that uh, the socialization of real things, the making them social and tokenizing them, um,
Yes.
making them immutable and not being protected from counterfeiting is going to be a huge part of of this blockchain technology taking over in the world.
Listen, it's interesting you mentioned that about the social application, because they are very, very clever projects that are still in a project phase, that hopefully we're gonna hit a slot in protocols in third generation blockchains. For example, there is a project that allows you one do what you just mentioned, allows you to have your own run your own Twitter practically. So you don't need a decentralized platform to pretty much watch what you're saying or you're not saying. So that will be your own responsibility. So there will be censor free. Also, you will be able to do some e-commerce transactions without some kind of middleman like eBay, for example. So that will be more responsibility of the user, obviously, because now you're going to be responsible for what you say, and also you have to be responsible for what you transact and what you're selling or what you're buying. But actually, will give you more freedom and more power on a peer-to-peer fashion.
Absolutely. The name of the project is Luxo. You know about Luxo?
Okay, now that rings a bell. Yes, yes.
All right. So people can go and check it out if they want. The name is Luxo. So
Okay,
if they read about that project, they will be able to learn about that
excellent.
entire use
Oh,
case.
okay. And also, just to wrapping up, and just one of the last topics of this conversation is that the other darling of this market was the NFT. Do you think that there's going to be a lot of synergy between the NFT world and the DeFi world? So people incorporating these non-fungible tokens into these protocols. Just to wrap it up.
Yes, absolutely. I see NFTs being used for subscriptions, for not just art, for subscription, real estate. Smart contracts are going to be on NFTs. Going to bridge to NFTs. Real things are going to be NFTs, like toys, luxury items. Cars are going to be NFTs too. Basically,
Perfect.
anything that you cannot duplicate is going to be an NFT.
Fantastic. Well, Syracuse, I think it was a great pleasure. I think we could talk for days, literally, about this wonderful
Absolutely.
world. But I think we reached the end of our slot in this conference. So I really hope that the people enjoy as much as I did talking with you and Jose about this topic. And it was a real pleasure, actually, to share this panel with you.
It has been the same, Carlos. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Carlos and Cero X. I really appreciate the conversation. It is a great starter for our next conversation on the value behind NFTs. All right. So without further ado, we are gonna get started de inmediato. We're gonna get right to it. So I would like to present to you guys Ms. Nancy Flores, who is another public relations intern at Blockchain Puerto Rico. We love her very much. And both Ernesto Ojeda and Steven Rivera, who are both avid investors and techies in the cryptocurrency scene. All right. So without further ado, I will be including them. And the floor is yours, guys. Take care.
Thank you, Jose. Hi, Ernesto and Steven. How are you today?
Pretty good. How are you? Great.
I'm great. Thank you for asking. So let's get started with this non-fungible token topic. I think that it is a really interesting topic that everybody should know about. But at least in my experience, I think sometimes there is a lot of misinformation. So my first question for you would be, what are non-fungible tokens, or NFTs? And how do they interact with blockchain?
So the best way to think of non-fungible tokens is really just as like digital deeds or certificates of ownership. So when you have something that exists in the digital realm, in order to prove ownership of it, there's various ways you can log into an account, and if the account is associated with an asset or whatever, then you can prove ownership. But the easiest way, and the way that does not require some sort of platform or some sort of registration or whatever, is simply by owning an NFT or a digital certificate that essentially proves your ownership over that asset or thing or whatever. It doesn't have to be an asset; it could just be anything that's digital, and you can do that almost universally on a network that is available worldwide, that's open, that isn't confined to some server in like Palo Alto, or rather synchronized across thousands of computers around the world, and is permissionless and cannot be changed. And I think that's the best. It's almost like a universal registrar that has the records that show and prove that you own whatever thing it is that you are trying to claim ownership of by actually having that NFT. That's really what an NFT is.
Okay, great. Thank you. That was a really great explanation. I think that's the easiest explanation that I've heard. I've heard so many difficult words, but that's really easy. Thank you. So we have seen, I have heard a lot about sport teams announcing their NFTs, and a lot of artists or a lot of famous people talking about NFTs. So first, how are non-fungible tokens impacting the sports industry?
So I think Steven and I have two different views on that. So the way that I see it is they're just monetizing, they're capitalizing on their brand equity. So if a sport is able to, because there's tangible things and intangible things, and NFTs are allowing sports to now capitalize on clout, I guess. So if a sports team wants to capture a moment, I guess, in the case of NBA Top Shots, which Steven is an expert on, or if a sport wants to capture, I guess, the essence of a player, they can do that, and they can sell that as an NFT and create an additional source of revenue that that essentially allows them to further capitalize on their brand, because all teams have brands.
Yeah, in my case, it's also about people capitalizing, but it's more like we are moving to a new trend that everything is moving on the on the net, because we can authentify the values. For example, on NBA Top Shot or with crypto art, whatever, doing it that way, you can create the value, and you can also create the certificate of ownership, and you can easily transfer, compare if you were, example, going to sell like all NBA or all baseball cards, will be more difficult to transfer that value to another person.
Okay, thank you. So could you please explain us what non-fungible tokens, like what is the advantage that they give us? For example, if we have a moment of NBA, I don't know, LeBron James doing a really good shot, or like having that title or that NFT versus just having the video.
So I guess the best way you have to kind of zoom out and see the big picture. So I guess the best example is if let's say that you have an object, that object might be a car, for example, and you're trying to sell it on an open market. I guess you could sell the vehicle by itself. However, if you have a title of ownership and you can transfer that title, I'm pretty sure someone's willing to pay more for that vehicle than if you were selling it on a black market, so to speak, because the vehicle could be stolen, the vehicle could be a fake, I don't know, or it could have issues with the with the repair history of the car. Whereas if you have a title of ownership and you legally own that vehicle, then the person's not going to experience much friction going forward with purchasing the vehicle from you and owning it in the future. So I guess the real big value add that NFTs have is that you can now, obviously, and by the way, in the real world, we're so accustomed to and we take for granted what the physical world is like that we forget about how kind of complex like proving ownership in the digital world is a completely different thing from proving ownership in the real world. Because ownership in the real world, it's tangible, so you can just have that thing. Whereas ownership in the digital world, it's synchronized on a server or across thousands of computers or whatever, but it's essentially digital data that's stored as bytes, and you need some way to be able to essentially capture like the existence or the being of that data. And the best way to do that is by having a title, right, a digital certificate to go with it. But it's also really important that that digital certificate exists on an open network that cannot be easily shut down. If for example, the Ethereum network cannot go bankrupt. The Ethereum network, it's really hard to corrupt it. And it doesn't just have to be the Ethereum network. It can also be like the Flow blockchain or whatever. Although that's an example of a centralized blockchain. But something like Ethereum or I guess Bitcoin with like colored coins, when you have an open network, it's a lot harder to, looks like you disappeared, but it's a lot harder to essentially, it's a lot harder to corrupt the existence of that certificate, of that record. And so that's why it's preferable to have that certificate stored on something like on the blockchain.
Interesting. We seem to be having some technical difficulties, but if Ernesto, you can share your perspective on Nancy's question, why does the NFT add value to the moment, right? Or the art, the file that it's attached to in some manner.
Yeah,
it's that we go back to, in that case, we go back to the collectible aspect and the proof of ownership. Like right now, there's watches are traded, NBA baseball cards from the 70s, the 80s are traded. So in this case, how would you tell if that moment or if that card or whatever is the real one and it's not a replica or a copy of it? The only way to do that is using NFT technology. And as we were saying, like NFT technology currently is just as a certificate of ownership. because right now, for example, in the Ethereum blockchain, you cannot store all the data because it's too expensive. So what the NFT represents is just ownership file that connects you to the data in a technical perspective. So it's just like this. The NFT value is because it can establish the scarcity. It can establish that the asset is the real one, as the same as in the physical world, you have the asset, but in the digital world, you need the NFT to prove that the asset is real.
Another way to think about it is, so there's actually really large companies that literally their value add is to authenticate, like prove the authenticity of like trading cards and stuff. So if you have a baseball card, like Steven said, from the 80s or whatever, you send it to this company, they authenticate it, and then you can sell it on their platform to somebody else. However, that requires a middleman, and it also requires trusting that middleman, because you could also end up like like I think Christie's was it? They sold a fake Salvatore. What is it called? Salvatore, whatever.
I don't remember.
It's like a portrait of Jesus, but
and it also requires that you keep the item in mint condition too.
Yeah, that too. But whereas if you have it, if you create it digitally from the get-go, and then you just you register an NFT of it on the blockchain, and then the NFT is associated with a digital asset or whatever it is, and then you were to go sell it, there's no need for an intermediary to authenticate anything, because you can just look for the records, look at the NFT, and it'll show you its history essentially. So that's really just the best way. That's really the value add. And not only that, but like, for example, there's a difference between a screenshot of an image of a digital piece of art and a screenshot that also has a title. Selling the screenshot, there's no value there. But if you have the screenshot and you also have the title that says I own this screenshot,
it proves that it's scarce. It proves the scarcity. That's the other part.
Yeah, I guess it creates a scarcity because you now have the title as well. It's kind of like when you sell, and this happens, by the way, across all markets. It's nothing new. If you're going to sell a Rolex, if you sell a Rolex with papers and compare that to a Rolex without papers, the one with papers is going to sell for a higher value, because the one without papers, it's sketchy. It's the same thing with a car with a title and a car without one. This one might be stolen. Whereas this one, you can just stick to the safe route and purchase a car that is real and has a title. Same thing with a house. You don't just go up to someone and with $100,000 and you just purchase the house outright. You're gonna want to do some paperwork, make sure that the house is belongs to the person that you think you're purchasing it from. And NFTs essentially solve for that by excluding the intermediary and taking out the paperwork, and just you can verify it for yourself. That whatever that thing is that is being sold actually has a title and it belongs to whoever's claiming ownership over it.
Okay, great. So for example, if we have an image that it's an NFT, then if you don't have the title, the only thing that it's useful for is like just for you to see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
And there's more use cases for NFT than just like images and collectibles. That's just like a niche.
Okay, great. Now that you talk about that, could you please tell us what are the other use cases for them on blockchain, please?
So I guess there's so many use cases. One of the best use cases that I can imagine is like if a company, for example, and we spoke about this earlier, like if a company like Ford, for example, was going to sell you a vehicle, they sell it to you with a 60 or 60,000 mile warranty, I believe. I might be wrong on that, but if you decide to sell that vehicle on a secondary market, meaning you sell it to a secondary owner, to another person, then I believe the warranty becomes like a 1 year, 10,000 mile warranty, even if you sell the vehicle the next day that you purchased it. And the reason why they do that is because there's a lot of risk involved, for Ford to be able to honor that warranty, because it belongs to another person. It no longer belongs to the person that they registered it with originally. Whereas if Ford could somehow capitalize off of that secondary sale, then perhaps they could offer the warranty to the second person that owns that vehicle. And they could offer the original warranty, the 60 or 60,000 mile warranty. And the way that they could do that is essentially when they sell you a vehicle, they could also sell you an NFT of it. And whenever you go to sell that vehicle, then obviously there's going to be an incentive on the purchasing party to also purchase, or to make sure that they get the warranty NFT from you as well as the vehicle. And so when they go to purchase the vehicle, they'll say, hey, can you also do a transfer of the warranty NFT? And you transfer the warranty NFT to them, and they pay whatever the market, Ford can just do like a simple calculation where they calculate the Blue Book market value of the vehicle, and they take 2.5% of that and they charge that to the person. And if the person wants to go ahead and I guess register themselves as the second owner of the vehicle, and they want to pay that fee, that 2.5% fee of the purchase price of the vehicle, then they would get the benefit of the of inheriting or grandfathering in the 60 or 60,000 mile warranty. That's one use case of an NFT.
Passport, digital IDs, there are different use cases, because the idea of NFT, like the idea that we're working right now since 2017, is that it's just proof of ownership. So technically, anything that that requires you to prove somehow that is the real copy, like a passport, an ID, for example, you can use NFT technology for that.
Another way is like if you have a MacBook or something like that, like this one, and you were, again, although Apple is pretty liberal about their warranty, but maybe it's I don't know, maybe Apple allows you to hop onto a subscription or something like that. And well, I guess they already do that.
When we were talking earlier, like there's some NFT that give you commercial rights and also like IP rights. So you can, if you purchase that NFT, technically you can use that asset to build something else. Like, let's say I know there's people right now using some sort of NFT like the CryptoPunks, but they're not the CryptoPunk, it's a newer one. And because they got the copyright and all the licensing of the image while they purchase the NFT, they're creating t-shirts, they're creating coffee cups, and they're creating all stuff, and they're making extra revenue because the NFT technology were able to give them the IP at the same time that they purchase the NFT.
And one more use case that I think is really interesting would be if something like YouTube, so like you could create an open YouTube, for example, where each video that you upload is really just an NFT, and so all of the proceeds that the YouTube, so whenever the video generates, or if the video generates income, that income could be redirected to whatever address the NFT is at. So it's almost like the compound protocol, except it's an NFT and it's the video that's generating revenue. So now you can not only generate revenue from the video as an income source, but you can also profit off of selling the video to somebody else, so that person can then take the video, have ownership of it, and then have all of the proceeds, all the income generated from that video redirected to their account. And so essentially it's almost like transferring ownership of an LLC, except you're transferring ownership of videos. Whereas the LLC is a revenue generating asset, right? It's a business, it represents a business, ownership over a business. These NFTs that are essentially videos, because videos are really just employees that are working for you 24/7, and garnering views and attention and making money off of ad income. You could essentially do the same thing with videos, where the videos are a business. Each video is one different separate business, and you could sell an NFT of that video, or just keep the NFT and then just have all the income redirected to your account.
Okay, great. Thank you. Those are a lot of uses.
Yeah.
So, Jose, could you please tell us the question? We have a question, I think. Okay, so Ignacio says, how good are NFTs in assuring that something is real and not a fake?
So I guess it depends on the code and the network that it's on, but
yeah, it's more like it's still we're in period that we're testing the NFT technology, but what people are doing right now, for example, I don't know if you guys know Beeple, but let's talk Beeple as an example. When people started creating his NFT, all the NFT come from a main wallet, and that wallet is known to be owned by people. So all the NFT that gets created using that wallet technically are from people. Another example is like a different artist, another artist, and he get recognized with that specifically wallet, won the certificate because we go back. NFTs are just a certificate of ownership. Once that certificate is signed by that wallet, and that wallet is known to be owned by X person, then we know that that NFT is real one. For example, that wallet could be a Ford wallet, or it could be like from a different car maker. That's the way that we are now identifying NFT.
I guess the more so another answer could be that depending on what network that NFT. So an NFT is really just a token, and if the NFT is registered on the Ethereum network, for example, so if it exists on the Ethereum network, then I would say that's a pretty solid network, and you can be almost 99.9% sure that it's almost unhackable. Whereas if it's on something like the Flow blockchain, which is a little bit more centralized, or actually it's pretty centralized, if Dapper Labs, which is the company that owns the Flow blockchain, if their servers go down, then your certificates of authenticity, right, the NFTs, they go down as well, and so that they kind of just immediately go to zero. I guess the answer to that question is how like certain could you be that an NFT is real or fake? It depends on the network, on the security of the network, and it also depends on your knowledge of the like who signed that NFT. So like if everyone knows that that Michael Jordan's wallet, right, or his stamp of approval or whatever is some wallet address, and you have an NFT and you can verify that it is that it's actually Michael Jordan's address, then you essentially have his signature on whatever thing it is that on the NFT. But it's important to have public knowledge of where the NFT is coming from in the first place.
Yeah, you can use the blockchain to know that.
Yes, I think that's the good thing about like the NFTs and the blockchain, that everything is really transparent and you can see like if it's real or not, right?
But I guess so if what you're saying is it possible to fake an NFT? The answer is no. The short answer is no. It's really hard to do it because you would have to undo like
technically,
like it would just be really hard.
People can take a screenshot of the original work and upload it, but then the address that is signing that work will not be the original.
And so you can easily just verify that it's fake.
Okay, thank you. So I think there's another question before we continue. Can we see it, please? Okay. How do we connect the title of an NFT with something that isn't digital?
So that's a good question. Because the thing is that the digital NFT, like it cannot be corrupted because it's digital, and so any actions taken to change it or whatever is going to be registered. Whereas in the real world, there's no like cookie trail of what happened to that thing, so you don't know if it's a fake or a real, and it can easily be disconnected. I guess the best way to answer that question is it's kind of like your house. I mean, I guess how do you know that your house is, or how do I know that your house is your house? Because your house is a physical thing that's backed by a digital record that exists on your municipality's or your county's records or whatever. It might be on paper too, I don't know. And the only way for me to do that is to go and check the county papers and then look at the county's drawings of the maps and how, like, where your house falls on the county's or the municipality's. I don't know how do you say that word in English? Their local zoning and planning map or whatever that shows where your house is and who owns that house, who owns that plot of land. it would require like intermediaries, which would be humans. And I guess the same thing would apply to an NFT, which exists digitally, and connecting that NFT to something physical would essentially, because the thing is, the NFT cannot be corrupted. You can't fake the NFT, but you can easily corrupt or fake the physical thing by messing with it. So like I can tamper, for example, with, if I say that this NFT belongs to an authentic Michael Jordan, a Jordan's shoes, but then I take the real Jordan shoes and I sell it in the secondary market, and then I just create a perfect replica of it. The NFT is still authentic, right? But now it's associated with an inauthentic or fake shoe. And I guess that would just,
it's hard. It's hard. Like people are trying to do it. I purchased like 2 months ago an NFT that had a physical copy, and I know that it's the real one, but and it has secure code for that. But it's still like a proof of concept. Like it's really hard to connect something so secure and tangible with something from the physical world. But I'll say that it's just hard to do it right now.
I mean, I guess the answer is the digital thing cannot be corrupted, or it's really hard to corrupt it. And if you corrupt it, if you manage to corrupt it, there's always going to be a digital trail that shows that you corrupted it. Whereas in the physical world, it's almost impossible to prove the authenticity of something. Like philosophically, like you really don't know, and you can't really prove that it's the actual thing. But I guess it would just matter. Like, I guess people's perspective would have to shift from it's not about the physical object, it's all about the digital object. As long as the digital object is associated with whatever the physical object is, and the physical object is fairly authentic looking or passes the litmus test for an authentic thing. And if you have that digital authentic certificate, like whatever, it's probably real. I think what's going to happen is, because we're as a society, we're moving into a more digital world. I think the authenticity of the real thing won't matter as much as the authenticity of the digital thing. Because like, again, back to that Jordan shoe example, if you sell the authentic shoe without the authentic NFT, then you've essentially sold that shoe at a lower price for no reason. Like the incentives just don't make sense. Why would you sell a shoe that's authentic, but not the NFT, the actual authentic NFT? Because you're going to take a lower price for that shoe, and then you're going to take a fake shoe and you're going to sell it with the real NFT, and you're going to sell it for, the same price that you would have just sold. Like you might as well sell the authentic thing with the authentic NFT, or you might as well, I guess the thing is, how did you get that real authentic NFT that proves that you have an authentic thing? Because that's probably where all the value is, and the physical object doesn't really matter that much. Because if you look at the incentives and you analyze it, like it doesn't matter. Like you're not gonna go through the work of faking the shoe if you cannot fake the NFT, if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you. So talking about these many use cases of NFTs, how do you think that NFTs can impact the art industry?
Well, well, we can start there with why NFT got really popular like early this year, and it's about the scarcity and stuff, but it's mostly because using NFT technology, you can also add like a small commission of like 5, 10, 15% in the smart contract. Once the artist sells the first work, after each subsequent sale, they will get a commission. And comparing that to what we can do now in the real world, the artist just sell the piece, and if it's appreciating value, they don't get revenue from that. So that's why I see a lot of good artists from the doing physical pieces now moving to the digital art, because now they can get recurring revenue. And what they're doing there is just combining. They create the NFT piece, and they also create the physical piece, and when a customer purchases, they send them both. So I think that that's why the trend is gonna move there, because there's more potential for artists if they go digital, besides just selling the physical pieces.
Okay, so do you think it would be, I don't want to say better, but maybe easier when the art pieces are just digital? Because I saw an example, well, to tell you an example, I saw an article of, there was a piece of Banksy, I think, that was destroyed and then it was made like an NFT.
Yeah.
So I thought it was really interesting, but it was also like really surprising. So I want to understand like why would they do that?
So
that was an experiment technically.
Yeah.
I read a lot. I purchased one of the smaller pieces. They sold the real piece like for $300,000, and they also sold like small pieces that were indicators of that proof that that moment happened. So I purchased one of those small ones, but they were just experimenting, like building a real world art and then creating the NFT. So they did that because they wanted the NFT to be the real one, but then you get into the controversy that technically Banksy did it. That's there's like an argument there, but it was just an experiment. You can call it that way. Like they were experimenting, transforming physical art into digital art.
But the way that I see it is, so a Banksy, right, is just a drawing. It's and the drawing is essentially expressed on a two-dimensional plane. And so like you can easily just scan the drawing and it should evoke a similar, or if not the same emotion as the original one, which is just on paper. So it's like art, for the most part, drawn art or painted art or whatever, can be expressed on a two-dimensional plane. And so you can convey it digitally and you can also convey it physically. Obviously, like it depends if the art, for example, has three-dimensional like what do you say, features or whatever, then you need the physical one. But if it's strictly like two-dimensional, then you can just scan it and burn the real one, and it's essentially the same thing. Whereas like if you're trying to sell, say, a watch, you can't make a digital copy of that watch, like a digital three-dimensional copy of the watch or 3D model of it, and then have the physical one and just burn the physical one, and then have the, like, that wouldn't make sense because the values in the tangible, like it's in the three-dimensional features of this watch. It's not necessarily in the digital features of the, like, I don't know how to explain that, but so like the thing with the Banksy is the reason why they were able to do that is because the Banksy can be expressed digitally or physically, and it's the same thing. Whereas something like a car, I can't just burn the car and sell you the title because the value's in the car, because that's where you get the utility from. Whereas the utility that you get from a Banksy is just the emotion that I guess you get from it or whatever, which can be expressed, on a piece of paper or digitally.
Okay. So still talking about this topic, but asking you, like, in your opinion, what made you get into the NFTs and all this world?
So my personal reason is because there's it's really complicated. But the easiest way to explain it is there's, I don't know exactly how many gigabytes there are of data, but I'm assuming it's like trillions and trillions, and it's growing exponentially. So the amount of data that we're producing, that we're creating every year, grows exponentially, and it's a stupid amount. And all of that data right now, the utility from it is from it just existing, and from us. So we derive utility from it because it just exists, and that's it. Like, no one's really claimed ownership of that data. So when I say that no one's really claimed ownership of the data, I mean, like, no one's claimed ownership of that data in a way that is universally accepted, right? So just because you have a video that's associated to your YouTube account, right? And you have the username and password of that YouTube account, like YouTube isn't a universal platform per se. It's so what I mean by that is maybe YouTube is censored in some country, and so like, or maybe YouTube isn't available in that country. I don't know. Then the value of that video is greater in the US or whatever than it is in that country because it's censored in that country. Whereas an open network like Ethereum, which is universally accessible, or whatever network you want to think of, when you own a piece of data. But I guess going back to the question, I'm kind of steering off of it. The answer to the question is because the opportunity is huge. There's a lot of data that's out there that's unclaimed. And I think that naturally the incentives are geared towards, as we're seeing right now, people claiming that data, so tokenizing it. We're seeing people tokenize YouTube videos. We're seeing people tokenize art. And we're going to see people continue to tokenize things. And I think governments and I think that, individuals and companies and institutions are going to move in that direction because they're going to be able to monetize something that they were previously not able to monetize. And the mechanics, if you think about the game theory of that, it's just they're aligned to go towards where the incentives are, and that's where the incentives are. And so I think I think it's just the natural evolution of it is that anything that can be tokenized or claimed, any piece of data that has utility that can be claimed will be claimed by somebody who either created it or didn't. But either way, it'll be claimed because they'll be able to capitalize from it. Whereas previously they were not. And so that's kind of a 0 to 1 thing. I don't know what Steven.
Yeah, it's the same as an entrepreneur. It's more like the opportunity type of stuff. Now we've been looking around for this like since 2017, but at that point the technology wasn't there, so that's why we went and did other stuff in the meantime. And we had a startup before this, and in that startup, precisely to do what we wanted to do, we needed the NFT technology. Because otherwise going through the normal channels will be so expensive or so costly or almost impossible for normal people to use to participate in that aspect. But that was like 2019, so it wasn't 2020 wasn't ready per se. It's still the technology isn't ready, but we know that that's where it's heading. That's why we are like focusing all of our attention there.
Okay, great. So you were talking about, Ernesto, you were talking about how there's a lot of information online and like people are going to take it or like get the title for that, even if they didn't create it. So I was thinking about that, and do you think that there's a way, or is there a way that if you created something that someone else already owns or already has the title, like is there a way to say like I did that, like that's mine?
Yeah, so I guess so here's a really good example is if you've been on, I don't know if you use TikTok, but on TikTok there's been these like videos of Tom Cruise, and they're this thing called deep fake, where they take an image or multiple images of Tom Cruise doing different facial expressions, and then they layer those images onto somebody's face, and that somebody looks like Tom Cruise but isn't Tom Cruise. But with a deep fake, right, essentially they're able to layer Tom Cruise's face onto their face, and it looks exactly and sounds exactly like Tom Cruise. And if you're good at mimicking his gestures, like it's really hard to differentiate between a video of actual Tom Cruise and a fake video, a deep fake of Tom Cruise. And so if you think about it, and it starts with Tom Cruise, but it might be, President Obama saying something really controversial, a deep fake of him, or it might be Joe Biden saying something really controversial, and it's a deep fake of him, and it's people trying to spread misinformation. I guess the thing is, eventually, what's gonna happen is there's gonna be an incentive to be able to what's the word? Differentiate between the fake, deepfake video and the actual authentic video, or any authentic video that Joe Biden puts out or Obama puts out. And the way to do that is if, say, for example, Joe Biden's Twitter account might tweet out an address, or Tom Cruise, let's use Tom Cruise because it's actually happening. So Tom Cruise is like, hey, there's deepfakes of me out there of me saying really controversial things and they're not real. The best way to prove, the difference between the authentic ones and the fake ones is if he puts out his wallet address, and then anytime he puts out a new video, he essentially creates an NFT, or he associates an NFT. Signature. He signs that video with an NFT, so he has a title of ownership that shows like, hey, this is an actual authentic video of me. It's not misinformation, it's real. And that way he's able to curb, the risk of someone putting out a deep fake that's really, really convincing of Tom Cruise saying something really controversial that might, that might stir up a situation that in 2005 wouldn't have been possible because the technology did not exist. So I think, again, the incentives are just lining up perfectly such that something along the lines of what exists as NFTs today, maybe it's some different iteration of it, but something is going to need to exist such that you are able to authenticate videos. And even Twitter accounts can be hacked. So like, you don't know if a person is actually tweeting out a tweet, but I don't know how to explain it, but in less than 4 minutes, but I guess the simplest way to put it is naturally the world that we're moving into is going to require some way to authenticate or to prove the realness of something, of whatever information is, and you need to you're going to need to be able to sign that or have a title or a certificate of ownership of that information that you put out, or of that data that you put out, that you've created. And so you can either claim it or you can allow people to claim it for you and create controversial things under your name. And yeah.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much. I think we ran out of time, but it was really helpful. At least I learned a lot, and I hope everyone learned a lot as well. Is there anyone else you want to add, or something we should know about NFTs and what's coming?
Just keep looking around. I think it's more than art and collectibles.
Oh yeah. So if there's one thing I have to say about NFTs is you have to think of NFTs simply as if in the real world, right? Almost everything that exists in the real world is registered. So like a laptop might come with a receipt or like a SKU or whatever. A car comes with a title. A house comes with a deed. A refrigerator might come with like a little warranty certificate that you have to kind of sign and then ship out to the company that you purchased the refrigerator from. Like almost everything in the real world that is not fungible, so that exists as a thing that's not necessarily monetary, so meaning it's not a financial instrument or like a money or something like that, in the real world exists, and usually there's a title attached to it or a piece of paper, whether it's a receipt or whatever. And in the digital world, that doesn't exist yet, but naturally, like as we evolve and we begin to place more value into the digital world and not take it for granted like we are right now, because we're going to need to evolve into that. Almost everything in the digital realm is going to require, the same authenticity that is required in the real world is going to be required digitally. And so it like thinking that NFTs is just art is minimizing it. It's a lot more than just art. I think, I don't know, that's my opinion, but it's pretty much going to be everything that exists in the digital world, because that's just how, I don't know, that's just, that's where in my opinion, that's where the incentives fall. And so that's where we're going to move towards.
Okay, thank you. What about you, Steven? Do you have something to add?
Yeah, just it's bigger than that. We were talking certificate authentication. We might see future like passport, ID, different stuff being used as an NFT. So it's just not art and collectible. It's just that collectible and art are the proof of concept, like the first interesting thing that we're just using to prove that NFT work. and it's working, as you can see. So it's more than that.
Okay. Well, thank you for your time and your
Sure.
knowledge.
Yeah, man.
Jose, are you there?
I am. Yeah. Thank you guys for joining us today. I was thinking about NFT use cases because there's someone who duplicated my account, my Telegram account, and they were sending messages. And I was thinking to my mind, if only I could sign with my wallet, right? If only I could sign my transaction, or someone could ask me for a signature that could confirm my identity, because they really duplicated my Telegram. I was getting messages.
Oh, I saw that. Yeah.
But I want to thank both of you, and Nancy, and our spectacular audience, and really everybody who was a part of this today. It was a very exciting experience, and I want to invite you all to follow our page and keep in touch. And today, in about an hour and a half, we're going to be hosting an event in Old San Juan. Ernesto, Steven, you guys are more than welcome to assist, and anybody who is in Puerto Rico that would like to come is more than welcome to join us, okay? And on that note, we reached the end of the conference. Thank you guys for joining us once more, and that would be it, okay?
All right. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
No problem. All right. Take care, guys, and until the next one.